Chapter 36-54. On the other side, Arbor, who was in a focused state, had placed all her attention into the depths of her spiritual mound realm. Previously, she had noticed several times that there was something in the spiritual mound realm. Ever since the essence water had completely fused with her and the Xuanji core had been completely absorbed by her, logically speaking, there should not be any other foreign objects in the spiritual mound realm. Arbor stared at the depths of her spiritual mound realm for a long time, and indeed, she saw a clue. In the past, it was a blurry blob that was not very clear. For some reason, it had become clearer recently. It was a blob that was wrapped in a white fog. Every time the spiritual mound realm absorbed spiritual energy, it would emit a blob of white light. Following that, a third of the spiritual energy that was absorbed into the spiritual mound realm would silently disappear. At this point, Xiaomu finally understood. As it turned out, other than Qiuqiu, this little swindler, who was endlessly absorbing the purest spiritual energy in the world for her, there was also this swindler inside her body. However, in the past, this blob of fog-like trash had always been hidden in the depths of Baal's roots. Furthermore, it was only the size of a palm and was not noticed by others. Therefore, she had never realized that this blob of trash was also absorbing the spiritual energy in her body. What could it be? Arbor did not panic. This blob of fog had been hidden in her spiritual mound realm for more than 10 years. If it wanted to harm her, it would have done so long ago. She was just like Baal, absorbing some spiritual energy from time to time, as though she was storing it. It did not cause much harm to her body. However, with this blob of fog, her cultivation became even more difficult. If other people's bodies could absorb 10% of the spiritual power, Lady Qiao would have to give 50% to the sapling and 30% to this thing. Thus, she would only be left with 20% of the spiritual power. Thankfully, Baal was strong and so was she. After Baal fused with the fragment Little Four, Baal ate the meat and she could at least get a share of the soup. Cough. Just this soup was enough for her to leap from the initial success stage of a level 13 Great Spiritual Master to a level 14 Great Spiritual Master. As for which minor realm she would reach, it would ultimately depend on her comprehension and talent. Arbor had been in seclusion above the sea for a total of 12 days. She was like a whale sucking in water and swallowing rivers. Almost all the spiritual energy on Fish Orchid Planet had been absorbed by her. Only then did she complete her advancement and slowly open her eyes. In fact, only a day had passed in the outside world. Arbor exhaled and looked up at the thin spiritual energy around him. He couldn't help but frown. After this round of absorption, the spiritual power of the Fish Orchid Planet would most likely need some time to recover. It seemed that he would have to transfer his companions to Planet Shaji or Planet Forest to cultivate first. Otherwise, with such thin spiritual energy, the cultivation effect would naturally not be good. Arbor walked back to the shore from the sea. Just as he stood still, he was surrounded by a group of people. "Oh, my Zhou, you've finally woken up." Qi Xianxian rushed in front of her and looked her up and down. "Jojo, what realm are you at now?" She looked at her with a hopeless expression. "Have you broken through to become a level 15 Great Spiritual Master?" Arbor shook her head. "How can it be so fast? I'm only a level 14 Great Spiritual Master. It's still early." Everyone chuckled and rolled their eyes in unison. "As if I'd believe you." Chapter 36-55. Now that this fellow said this today, there was a possibility that her cultivation realm would climb up again tomorrow. That would make everyone's jaws drop. In any case, they were already used to being shocked, so their mood became especially numb as they watched. The little stoic suddenly pinched Qi Xuanxuan's small face and said excitedly, "I'll bring you guys to stroll around a place." "A forest," Mata said expressionlessly from the side. "We've already strolled around." As he spoke, he took out several brightly colored mushrooms from his inner world. "Do you want to eat roasted mushrooms? Are you courting death?" Everyone slapped away the mushrooms in his hand. "Are they poisonous?" Mata continued to expressionlessly say, "They aren't. I've already eaten 2, and they can even nourish the spiritual energy in my body. Don't doubt me, heh, they are just that miraculous. The little stoic pursed her small lips and coughed lightly. So you guys have already been to Forest Planet. Alright then, I'm going to continue my closed-door cultivation on planet Shaji. Go cultivate on planet Shaji for the next few days so that I won't rob you of all your spiritual energy. There's plenty of food in this forest. You can hunt for whatever you want to eat. After instructing them, the little stoic turned around and flew to planet Shaji to continue her closed-door cultivation. Everyone looked at each other in astonishment. The little fatty pinched Qi Xuanxuan's chubby cheeks. Does it hurt? Bah, of course it hurts. Try pinching me. Qi Xianxian irritably slapped away that guy's hand and glared at him. Don't you guys find it strange? Lu Yu asked with a light cough. Didn't Jojo just come out of closed-door cultivation? Why was the little girl suddenly so determined? It was as if she had been provoked by something in her eyes. What was going on? I reckon it's because she's vexed, so she simply went into closed-door cultivation to put an end to her wild imagination. When she thought of how a certain person hadn't returned to the capital yet, Qi Xianxian couldn't help but shed a tear of sympathy for him. I don't think it's entirely because of this. Duan Muqing shook his head and turned to look in the direction that Arbor disappeared in. He said aloofly, even someone as talented as Jojo is working so hard. Then everyone's expression turned solemn as they waved their hands and said, let's go. Arbor had been in seclusion on planet Shaji for a month. When he opened his eyes, he discovered that his realm had advanced a small step. Now, he had successfully entered the peak of level 14 Great Spiritual Master Realm. Moreover, after this period of devoted cultivation, her realm had stabilized quite a bit. With a solid foundation, it would be easier to climb up in the future. Arbor heaved a long sigh. He took out the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron and touched it. From his inner world, he took out a lot of materials and crystals and fed them to the cauldron. Seeing these precious materials being melted into liquid by the flames in the cauldron and being absorbed by the small cauldron, Lord Jojo's lips could not help but curl up slightly. Eat more. When all 9 stars are lit up, we will be blessed. Sir Jojo muttered to himself as he patted the small cauldron. Master Silver. The little water baby waddled to her side and rubbed against her leg. Master Silver, Master Silver. Is Chucho still in closed-door cultivation? Arbor threw the little water droplet onto her shoulder. Her bright eyes landed on the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. She repeatedly touched the small cauldron and looked at it. Mn, the little water baby nodded vigorously. Chapter 3656. Master, Chucho might have to go into seclusion for a while. The little water baby nuzzled her neck and sniffed. On its soft and transparent little face, there was an expression of infinite joy. It loved being close to the little master the most. Happy. Arbor tilted her little head and looked at it with some confusion. Chucho, why did you suddenly go and fuse with Fragment Little 4? Fragment Little 4 had finally converted to the right path. Previously, when it saw Tiandi wandering around in the star field, it seemed to be very happy. Why did it suddenly have this awareness? You don't know, Master. It was very dangerous at that time. Why did the tree suddenly grow so big? The little water droplet gestured with its transparent little paw. Little Tree immediately said that it was one of its branches that absorbed a lot of pure holy power. Master Jojo blinked. She went into seclusion in a hurry. Only now did she know that there was such a change at that time. Holy power? Yes, yes. The little water droplet looked envious. Chucho really knows how to curry favor. It just left a random branch outside and it could absorb so much holy power. Different people, spirits, really had different lives. You mean, its branch? Arbor's little hand that was touching the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron paused. Could it be the branch that was left with Jojo's lotus? Definitely. The little water droplet pouted. It must be His Highness the Crown Prince. He must have dug some mine and it gave Little Tree's branch some benefits. Arbor's eyelids twitched slightly. What mine? Could it be a holy stone mine? Didn't that old man say that he left a holy stone mine for her? Could it be so coincidental that Jojo's lotus dug it out? This liar old man even lied to Jojo, saying that his array was invincible and that no one could resist it. Even a fly couldn't fly in. The more Master Jojo thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. She took out her communication jade talisman and looked at it. There was no message. Stretching out his hand, he saw that in the water ripples formed by the magic pupil, Kai Xiao and Kai Chi were anxiously pacing back and forth outside the Eastern Palace's bedchamber. Arbor's heart stirred slightly, and his figure flashed and appeared in the hall. With a wave of his sleeve, the door of the hall slowly opened to both sides. Kai Xiao turned her head and saw the figure of the little crown princess appear in front of the palace. That graceful figure was elongated by the light in the sky. The two of them heaved a sigh of relief, thanking the heavens that the crown princess had finally come out of seclusion. They were so anxious that they were about to die. If the crown princess did not come out, they would have gone in to see what was going on. The wedding dresses and accessories prepared by Enai Chang Market were sent in like water. Jojo, expressionless, allowed himself to be manipulated. Looking at the girl in the bronze mirror, she was 16 years old with a slender figure. Dressed in a bright red wedding dress, her brows were like distant mountains, and her lips were vermilion. The phoenix beaded crown was composed of thousands of large and small beads. When it pressed heavily on the little crown princess's head, her expressionless face instantly froze. The beads in front of her collided slightly, and the string of beads swayed as she walked, causing red muslin to flutter. When the little girl walked out leisurely, it was as if a red sunset had dyed the horizon, red as seductive as fire. Kai Xiao followed half a step behind her. Wiping the sweat on her forehead, she whispered, "To the crown princess, His Highness, he hasn't come back." "He's come back. No rush." The little crown princess's cold voice seemed to contain magic. Chapter 36-57. His voice was neither fast nor slow, and seemed to be infused with some kind of magic. It instantly calmed the hearts of the surrounding palace maids and eunuchs. All right, since the crown princess had so much confidence in His Highness, what was there for them to be afraid of? The crown prince would probably appear when the time came, right? Thinking of this, Caichi and Kai Xiao raised their heads and puffed out their chests. Even their steps were accompanied by the wind. The wedding ceremony was to be held in the Imperial Ancestral Hall. Therefore, the group of people left the Eastern Palace and boarded the Phoenix sedan chair that had been prepared beforehand. The Phoenix sedan chair was indeed led by the blazing blood Phoenix and was pulled by 16 flying magpies. There were thousands of ceremonial guards in front and behind, and tens of thousands of military officers. Hundreds of red-crowned cranes wrapped in red silk led the way and escorted the sedan chair. Looking up, the horizon seemed to have attracted a bright red neon light, all the way to the Mo ancestral temple, Mount Tiansheng. Mount Tiansheng stretched for thousands of miles. For a moment, the mountaintop was filled with all kinds of birds and beasts. When the Phoenix sedan chair flew out of the imperial city from the Eastern Palace, it attracted the attention of many people. Some busybodies naturally ran along to see the commotion. However, at this time, both sides were filled with city guards. A main road was empty in the middle, and the pedestrians could only shrink to the sides. Sir Jojo sat expressionlessly in the sedan chair. His clear and cold eyes casually glanced before retracting his gaze. "Master, do you suspect that someone will come to the Imperial Ancestral Temple to cause trouble today?" Qing Wan transformed into a bird and stood on a large pearl at the side of the sedan chair. Her small eyes looked around vigilantly. Arbor nodded with an indifferent expression. "This is only my guess." For some reason, she felt that today's wedding ceremony would not be too peaceful. However, the person who was going to make a move had not appeared yet. She did not know what they were planning. Whoever dares to ruin Lord Xiao Qiao's wedding, he or she will die. Arbor lowered her eyes coldly. She did not have any concerns about not seeing blood on her wedding day. Anyone who had ulterior motives and wanted to make her uncomfortable would not have a good ending. Arbor looked down and hugged the white jade box tightly. Inside the box was a dazzling golden seal that soared into the 9 heavens. The Mo clan sect was built at the peak of Mount Heaven Saint. From the peak to halfway up the mountain, there were guards of the palace of Moism standing guard all day long. Ordinary people were naturally not allowed to go up. Halfway up the mountain were the mines of the 6 aristocratic families. However, the Sure family's mine on Mount Heaven Saint was now in the hands of the little girl. The remaining 5 great clans' mines on Mount Heaven Saint were all located at the foot of the mountain. Although the 5 aristocratic families had the right to mine, Mount Heaven Saint was where the imperial family's ancestral hall was located. Therefore, every time they wanted to mine, they had to get the approval of the Ministry of Rights and the supervision of the imperial government. This was to prevent any of them from cheating the location of the dragon vein. It would take at least a month for the mine to be approved. Every time the mine was mined, there would be many officials present to supervise. Therefore, as time passed, the aristocratic families grew tired and unhappy of coming to Mount Heaven Saint to mine. The main reason was that not only did they not find any useful ores in their 2 or 3 attempts, they also had to put in all sorts of effort and planning. In the end, it was all for naught. After a few attempts, the aristocratic families could no longer be bothered to think about the mines on Mount Heaven Saint. The cry of the Bloodfire Phoenix drew the little girl's attention. She looked straight ahead and saw red flowers blooming all over the mountain. Chapter 36:58. The little crown princess's phoenix palanquin glided across the sky, and the mountain below was suddenly full of vitality. Wherever the thousands of people passed, the flowers and plants that were originally flattened by them once again drilled out from the ground, fluttering in the wind. The red flowers and green willows were splendid. Everyone clicked their tongues in wonder, only feeling that their eyes were not enough to see. Turning their heads to look, between the mountain walls, there were originally only some climbing vines, but at this time, countless green leaves and flowers drilled out, covering the sky in an instant. It was as if at this moment, the heaven and earth were filled with flowers and grass, like colorful satin, fluttering in the wind, their fragrance spreading everywhere. This was really too magical. Kai Xiao and Kai Chi rode on their red-crowned cranes, and couldn't help but turn their heads to look, but felt that their vision was breathtaking. It was really too beautiful, thousands of words couldn't describe the beautiful scene in front of them. Little Ball, are you awake? Arbor's eyes slightly brightened, and he closed his eyes to concentrate, using his divine sense to look at the little tree in his Dantian star field. Looking at the thriving tree in front of him, Jojo felt very happy. It was no longer that half-bald, miserable, pitiful, hunched, and ugly appearance from before. At this time, the little tree's whole body was emerald green, sparkling and translucent, and the whole tree seemed to be coated with a layer of green liquid, shining so brightly that it was almost dazzling. Its trunk already needed 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Its leaves covered the branches, and every leaf was full of emerald green. It was simply beautiful to the point that people couldn't take their eyes off it. That emerald green appearance that was full of vitality was simply delightful. The little crown princess's expressionless face suddenly melted into a faint smile. Her little ball should have already entered the late stage of maturation. This kind of growth speed really made her feel proud of it. Look, on one of its branches, a fruit the size of a thumb was hanging. This was the second holy fruit that was slowly beginning to take shape. She believed that it wouldn't be long before this holy fruit would gradually grow bigger. Little Ball, Little Ball. She called out its name. The little water baby excitedly jumped out from the star field, jumping on her hand and shouting, "Master, Little Ball hasn't woken up yet. But when it wakes up, Little Earth and I should be able to go into seclusion to advance." Arbor patted the head of the little girl, "When Ryu." At this moment, Little Earth shouted excitedly in the star field, "Wow! Master, quickly come and take a look. The longevity tree is bearing fruit." What? Arbor was both delighted and shocked. The longevity tree only bloomed in the Xian domain and bore fruit in the divine domain. Did this mean that her spirit realm was about to transform into a god realm? She remembered that the last time she had been to the profound realm and the spirit realm, it had happened when she had made a major breakthrough. Logically speaking, since she had yet to break through to God tier, it was impossible for Paradise Planet to suddenly transform into a divine domain. She was in the middle of a very important wedding, so please don't cheat her. Xian domain changing to divine domain would probably make her sleep for a while. Moreover, when the entire star field was in turmoil, she wouldn't be any better off. The connection with the star area would be cut off quickly. Master, don't worry, it's fine. The star field hasn't changed. It's just that when little tree enters the late stage of maturation this time, little water and I will also grow rapidly. Little Earth said proudly, now, as long as little water and I nourish it, and with little tree's growth, the longevity tree will definitely bear fruit. Chapter 36:59. Yes, yes. Master, don't panic. Everything will be fine. The longevity tree will take some time to bear fruit. It will take about 3 months at the fastest. Xiao Mu's heart relaxed, and it was only then that she swallowed back the words, scammer. Arbor raised his hand and patted the water baby's soft head. He smiled and said, all right. Arbor hugged the white jade box and looked up. He saw the phoenix palanquin being led by the blazing blood phoenix and flocks of red-crowned cranes as it flew to the peak of Mount Heaven Saint. It circled in the air a few times. The guard of honor extended all the way from the peak of Mount Heaven Saint. Looking down from the sky, the main mountain path of Mount Heaven Saint was filled with attendants from top to bottom. The wedding procession extended all the way from Mount Heaven Saint to the imperial capital. The young crown princess and company had already reached the peak of the mountain. The people at the back of the procession had just exited the eastern palace. The Heaven Saint Palace of the Mo clan was built on a cliff. It was shrouded in mist and hazy. There were 9,999 steps down. From afar, it looked as if it was a flying palace that had descended upon the mountains. It was majestic and grand. Gazing into the distance, one would sigh with lofty sentiments. It was surrounded by emerald colors and auspicious birds. Tens of thousands of magpies were lined up in a row, chirping beautifully. It was as if a long bridge had been built over the rainbow at the peak of the mountain. The members of the wedding procession felt that they had lived their lives in vain to be able to come here today and witness such a scene. In the future, when they talked about this with anyone, it would be a great topic of conversation. They had definitely seen such a grand scene. The young crown princess and her attendants stepped off the Magpie Bridge and landed on the first step. The 9,999 steps of the ancestral temple could only be walked by the emperor or the nobles. None of them were exempt. The young crown princess stood on the steps and looked up at the palace that was 10,000 steps away from her. She couldn't help but sigh as she looked at the heavy phoenix crown on her head. The road was so long. Walking alone made her feel melancholy at this moment. The bell on the mountain peak began to ring. The little crown princess lifted the red veil and dragged the wedding dress that was several meters long. Step by step, she walked up the stairs. Big liar. He had promised to come back on the 6th of June. Jojo, Sama had to walk such a long flight of stairs and perform such a complicated ceremony alone. Jojo, Sama has promised you. Even if you're alone, you have to complete the formalities and complete the tasks that you have to complete. Jojo, Sama has already walked 333 steps, and you still haven't returned. Jojo, Sama has already walked 999 steps, but you are still nowhere to be seen. Lady Xiao Xiao had already taken 1,300 steps. Jojo completed the 2,088 steps. It's okay. Even if he were to walk all 9,999 levels alone, he would still have to walking on a path to the end in this lifetime. She only had one path, and that was to live it with this fellow. Hua, the honor guard standing on both sides of the long stairs suddenly let out a cry of surprise. Arbor's heart skipped a beat and she turned her head back. She saw that the sky seemed to be dyed red by a golden red color, and a gorgeous red color rose from the Magpie Bridge. Her eyes lit up in an instant as she stared fixedly in that direction. A long dragon's roar sounded in the space between heaven and earth. The figure standing on the golden dragon stood upright, and his long hair was slightly messy. His bright red robe instantly wiped out all the colors in the sky and earth. Chapter 3660. At this very moment, time seemed to have frozen and came to a standstill. The young crown princess held her breath. She turned a deaf ear to the screams and cheers around her. She also completely couldn't see other people or other colors. In her eyes, there was only that figure that seemed to be moving over like a ball of flames. These two faint red figures were reflected in her bright eyes. At this very moment, in this very instant, everything seemed to have turned into a puff of smoke and died out bit by bit. It was as if that person's moving figure was the only thing left in the entire sky and earth, in the 9 heavens and thousands of miles of clouds. Her line of sight followed his movements as he leaped down from the sky and landed directly on the first step of the long staircase. The young crown princess lifted her skirt and dashed down the steps without hesitation. As for him, he followed the long and wide bluestone steps and quickly ascended them. What kind of stunning visual enjoyment was this? At this moment, there were more than 10,000 people in the ceremonial procession, but at this very moment, it was so quiet that one could practically hear a pin drop. Everyone held their breaths as their gazes chased after those two balls of flames excitedly. Closer, closer, they were getting closer and closer. The young crown princess flew up and leaped. She practically used all the strength in her body to jump up from the long staircase and rapidly pounced down, plunging headfirst into that guy's arms. This pounce in the air, the speed of flight, and the full weight of gravity, was extremely shocking. His Highness the Crown Prince had already stretched out his arms and firmly caught his wifey, hugging her tightly in his arms. Thousands of words couldn't compare to a single look in each other's eyes. No one could see any expression on the little stoic's expressionless face all day long. At this moment, however, her eyes couldn't help but redden as she complained aggrievedly, "Big liar, you made me climb 2,088 steps alone." Walking alone was truly unbearable. Especially since he had long gotten used to walking hand in hand with someone, he was truly unwilling to suddenly become alone. Previously, Arbor had suppressed all the panic, attachment, discomfort, and irritation in his heart. At this moment, when he saw this person, waves of grievance, worry, and frustration all surfaced in his heart. When her gaze fell on his handsome face with a faint smile, suddenly, it was as if everything had calmed down, and her heart was inexplicably empty. "I'm sorry for making my Jojo worry." Mo Lien gently planted a kiss on her forehead. Then, he reached out and picked her up horizontally. He strode up the stairs and laughed loudly, "Let your husband carry you up the rest of the way." A burst of thunderous cheers came from the guard of honor. Everyone had a smile on their faces. Their crown prince had returned. The happiest people were none other than the people of the Eastern Palace. Kai Xiao and Kai Chi couldn't help but wipe the tears from the corners of their eyes as a smile appeared on their faces. His Highness did not disappoint the crown princess. He was back. It was a grand wedding, and it was passed down by word of mouth. Such a legendary wedding was recorded in the annals of history, and future generations would worship it endlessly. However, this was a story for another time. At this time, Prince Mo was carrying the wifey he longed for and quickly walked up the stairs. He had to rely entirely on his 2 legs to climb up this long flight of stairs. After all, the surroundings of Heaven's Saint Palace concealed one's cultivation. There really wasn't any discount at all on the 9,999 steps. Chapter 3661. When they climbed to the 6,666 step, they could see many familiar faces of officials. It was really hard on these senior officials. They didn't even know how they managed to climb such a long step. No wonder a few of them looked like they had nothing left to live for. Sir Jojo lay on Prince Mo's shoulder and turned his head to look at the stunned officials. His little head twitched, and he actually reached out his paw to wave at them. "You've worked hard." Everyone, no. His Highness the Crown Prince had returned? No wonder when they looked up, they saw the extraordinary splendor in the sky and cheers at the bottom of the steps. But why was the little crown princess carried up? Who knew how difficult it was to climb these thousands of steps? Among them, there were quite a few senior officials who had started taking chi-generating pills 3 days ago just for today's experience. His Highness the Crown Prince was young and strong, but carrying someone and climbing thousands of steps without panting, it really made them feel melancholy. Sure enough, there was no harm without comparison. "Hubby, are you tired?" The little Crown Princess took out a small handkerchief embroidered with lotus flowers from her pocket and wiped the thin mist on this fellow's forehead. Mo Lien glanced at her and couldn't help but want to laugh. He carelessly rubbed his head against her face. "How can I be tired? You're really lighter than a piece of paper. Is it because your hubby isn't in the capital, so you don't eat on time?" The little Crown Princess didn't say anything. She had been in seclusion recently, so how could she have time to eat? Could it be that she had really lost weight? She raised her hand to pinch her chubby little chin. "Not lost weight. Hubby, then do you want to put me down and let me walk on my own?" The main thing was that from here up, there were officials standing on both sides of the steps. It wouldn't be good if they saw her cheating all the way up and the Crown Prince carried her up. "It's okay, I'll carry you to the 9,900 step and put you down. This way, you'll accompany me for 99 steps and it'll naturally be a long time." As he spoke, he lowered his head and rubbed his face against hers. He said softly, "Jojo, I made you walk 2,088 steps by yourself. I'll make it up to you in the future." Arbor nodded. "Alright, since you're going to compensate me, I'll forgive you for now." Mo Lien almost laughed out loud. Her phoenix eyes were full of smiles as she nodded repeatedly. "Wife, you're the best." When they reached the 9,800th floor, Lord Chao coughed. When they reached the 9,900th floor, the old giant Pain Wang Chong and the others glared at them furiously. The little Crown Princess even cheated in her wedding. This was really infuriating. Mo Lien reached out and put his wife on the ground, his arms still around her waist. He glanced at the old king of Giant Pain who was glaring at them. "Uncle, what happened to your eyes?" Everyone was speechless. "Back then, your mother walked up the 9,999 steps by herself." The old king of Giant Pain hated that he couldn't spit on his face. Shouldn't there be a limit to how much he doted on his wife? It was even worse than that troublesome father of his. Mo Lien reached out to hold his wife's hand and nonchalantly continued walking up the steps. He said slowly, "My father didn't know how to love his wife. How can he compare to me?" Everyone, the little Crown Princess nodded and said to the old king of Giant Pain in full agreement, "Lien's father really can't compare to Jojo's Lien. The difference is too great." Everyone. Chapter 3662. They were only 99 steps away from the platform of the Heaven Saint Palace. With everyone's hearing, they naturally heard it. Prince Kong, who was standing at the edge of the altar, couldn't hold back his laughter. He couldn't help but burst out laughing. Then, the great emperor glared at him. The great emperor glared at the entrance of the Heaven Saint Palace. When he saw the couple walking over together as if they had stolen all the colors in the world, the anger in his heart suddenly subsided. He had to admit that his daughter-in-law's words were flawless. Compared to him, his son was too successful in protecting his daughter-in-law. Today was his son's wedding. If Wuxia was here, it would be perfect. On the 6th of the 6th month in the 28th year of Tai, the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess got married. The ceremony was passed down to the Imperial Ancestral Temple. The female officials gave orders to the Emperor and knelt in front of the Heaven Saint Palace to read the ceremony for the Crown Princess. The Crown Prince and his wife knelt to the heavens and earth, kneeling to the Emperor and Empress. That night, they returned to the palace. All the concubines and princesses waited below the red steps and knelt to congratulate them. After the ceremony, Arbor felt like she was falling apart. She wanted the whole world to know that Lotus belonged to Jojo and no one was allowed to covet her. She didn't know how long the banquet would last. When Jojo returned to the Eastern Palace, Kai Xiu and Kai Chi immediately came to take her crown and help her change her clothes. His Highness was worried that you would be hungry, so he asked you to eat something first. After wearing the heavy phoenix crown for an entire day, Lord Xiqiao's neck was indeed a little uncomfortable. After changing into a set of bright red casual clothes, Xiaomu sat down next to the red sandalwood parasol crystal mystic jade bed. She took a small bowl and swirled it around with a spoon, pretending to be nonchalant as she asked, "How long will the banquet last?" "Tonight, only the courtiers and their families will be entertained. However, I'm afraid the banquet will last until very late." "Oh." The little crown princess replied expressionlessly. Her small hand was clutching the corner of the blanket tightly, and she fidgeted on the edge of the bed. After half an hour, the little crown princess put down the bowl and asked Kai Chi, "When will His Highness return?" Kai Chi couldn't help but twitch her mouth. "The crown princess just asked that question half an hour ago, Crown Princess. His Highness shouldn't be back anytime soon." "Oh." The young crown prince consort once again responded expressionlessly. After half an hour, she asked again. This time, all the maids in the room understood. The little crown princess was very anxious. That was right. The crown prince consort and His Highness had been separated for so long, and they had been going through the formalities on the way here today. They probably didn't have much time to talk. When she was not in front of him, he might be able to suppress this longing. But once she knew that this person was so close to her, she couldn't suppress her longing at all. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Prince, Princes, all right, there's no need to be so courteous. You may all leave." Prince Mo's voice sounded from outside the room. The little crown princess immediately threw away the book in her hand and stood up abruptly. Her big, sparkling eyes stared at the door. Crown Prince Mo strode into the bedchamber with large strides and raised his hand to stop everyone's salutations. He then scuttled to the young crown prince consort's side, his eyes radiant as he pulled her into his embrace. "Ciao ciao." Phew, her heart calmed down. Under the bright candlelight, Mo Lien couldn't suppress the longing in her heart as she looked at the little one's delicate features. Chapter 3663. What should I do, Jojo? I really missed you so much. He reached out to hold her small face and stared fixedly at the little one in front of him, a faint smile on his lips. "Your Highness." Saishio pursed her lips in amusement and went forward to hand over the nuptial wine. Mo Lien reached out to take it and walked into the depths of the beaded curtain while holding the little girl's hand. He waved his hand to dismiss everyone. Saishio and the others bowed and retreated out of the main hall in a single file. As the hall doors slowly closed, Prince Mo held his wifey's hand and walked to the bedside to sit down. The beaded curtain made a crisp tinkling sound as it bumped against each other. A pair of red candles were nearly half lit, and a faint halo enveloped the hall. The two people gazed deeply at each other, and for a moment, their hearts were surging with emotions. "Jojo." Mo Lien reached out to lift her chin and leaned over to kiss her on the lips. His gentle voice rang softly in her ear. "My heart is content to have you for the rest of my life. Let's drink together. We will never leave each other for all eternity." Arbor gazed deeply at him and involuntarily nodded. The little stoic sipped the wine while secretly peeking at her dear husband. With this glance, her small face couldn't help but blush inexplicably. The crown prince drained the wine in one gulp and quickly put down the cup. Afterwards, he flung off his crimson outer robe and leaned against the bedside with his slender figure. He gave her an affectionate smile and blinked his phoenix eyes. "Wifey, from this moment on, hubby can do whatever you want with me. I definitely won't have any complaints." This guy was truly too devilish. Sir Jojo's originally restless heart started to thump even more wildly at this moment. "Wait a moment." The little girl waved her hand at him and then turned around to sit on the small stool beside the bed, rummaging through her inner world with rapt attention. Prince Mo, who was waiting for his wifey to throw herself at him, was truly curious and couldn't help but sit up straight. He stretched his head over and rested it on his wifey's shoulder, breathing into her neck. "Wifey, what are you rummaging for? Your husband is already like this. Why don't you want to look at me? You're alone in your thoughts." The little crown princess suddenly turned her little head and her little mouth bumped into his chin. Prince's eyes lit up. He reached out and wrapped his arms around her slender waist. He rubbed his head against her neck. Jojo, you kissed the wrong place. Let's do it again. Jojo, expressionless, pushed a small booklet in his face. Mama gave it to me before the wedding. Do you want to take a look? The Crown Prince received it with one hand with a puzzled expression. He flipped open a page and glanced at it. Sir Jojo stared at him intently. He blinked his phoenix eyes. Although there was no expression on his face, the tips of his ears had turned red. Wife, do you think your husband still needs to read these? The booklet instantly flew out of the beaded curtain. The hanging beads swayed under the red candlelight, undulating and rippling. His lips sealed hers like a storm. He reached out and tore off her red smock, flinging it out of the curtain with a flick of his wrist. Sir Jojo was a little confused. He suddenly felt that he couldn't keep up with Prince Mo's pace. How did the two of them move to the red sandalwood crystal mysterious jade bed in the blink of an eye? They were clearly talking about that booklet just now. Immobilize. Sir Jojo suddenly took out a blue talisman and slapped it on Prince's forehead. Chapter 36-64. A certain crown prince, who was hugging his wifey without letting go, looked up at a certain talisman floating in front of his forehead. He blinked, and blinked again. Pfft, he laughed out loud. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he reached out to touch the talisman on his forehead. He looked at his wifey with a grin and said softly to her, Jojo, how can you use an immobilization talisman on your husband? Don't worry, even if my body isn't immobilized, your husband is still yours. I'll lie down wherever you want me to lie down, and you can do whatever you want, all right? Chirp. The little girl was expressionlessly kissed, but her small face remained calm and taut. Although she felt that the place she was kissed was a bit hot, just like her heart right now, so hot that she was at a loss for what to do. I flipped through that booklet just now. Although the little stoic's voice was soft, it was extremely calm. Prince Mo's mouth twitched. He suddenly had the urge to burst into laughter for some reason. He felt that his darling might say something that would make him unsure whether to laugh or cry later. As expected, the little crown princess said calmly, I think there's a big problem with the drawings in that booklet. Not only are both sides unbearably ugly, but they also describe the woman as extremely unbearable. She criticized apathetically. I've already studied the positions in the booklet. There are several strange positions that are very detrimental to the health of the body. This is supposed to be a good thing for the harmony of yin and yang, but if you follow the booklet, you'll most likely sprain your waist and crotch. If it's serious, you might not be able to do it in the future. Mo Lien laughed out loud. He lowered his head and pressed against his wifey's body. His head nuzzled back and forth against her neck, and his slender body couldn't help but tremble slightly. We're talking about serious matters. The little stoic pushed him. What are you laughing at? What's so funny about such a baffling person? I already said that booklet is useless. Don't worry, your husband won't follow that booklet. Your husband, sleeping talisman. Arbor slapped another talisman on his forehead. Two red clouds flew up on his stoic little face. Mo Lien leaned over to cover her lips with two fluttering talismans. His eyes flickered with mirth as he said softly, my Chow Chow, don't stick talismans on me anymore, alright? I missed you so much. You don't know, but when I was in Grey Ping Village, I was thinking about Jojo all the time. Jojo, what if I don't come back today and miss the wedding ceremony? Just thinking about it makes me feel terrible. As he spoke in a low voice, his hands nimbly untied her belt and threw her out of the curtain. Arbor felt his body heat up. He was originally a man of the fire attribute, and his body was covered in flames that could burn everything. But today, at this moment he was much more passionate than he had been in the past. The little stoic's watery almond-shaped eyes were already somewhat dazed and shattered. She mumbled, why are you tearing my clothes? These are all new clothes, I'll buy a few new batches later. The little stoic felt that the crown prince's hand roaming over her body was like a source of fire. Wherever he touched, it would burn, as if he wanted to burn her completely. She hugged his waist with both arms and said resentfully, "I've already taken off 2 pieces of clothing, but you've only taken off 1. Mo Lien's lips curled into a smile. He grasped her small hand and pressed it against his chest, saying softly, "It's so troublesome." Chapter 3665. What's so troublesome? The little stoic originally wanted to ask this, but she was immediately startled by the airflow that lightly shook her body. The crown prince's control of his strength was just right. With such a jolt, the 2 people's clothes were completely shredded. Like snowflakes, they fluttered to the ground. The little stoic blinked and suddenly cried out in alarm. She reflexively reached out to hug Mo Lien, her entire body shrinking into his embrace. How could it be so easy to take off his clothes? In an instant, the 2 of them were naked. "Jojo, don't be afraid." He patted her gently on the back. "Your husband isn't scary." The little fellow wriggled in his arms and looked up at him. He tried his best to put on a calm face and said stubbornly, "What a joke. Why would I be afraid? The Tao of husband and wife is the harmony of yin and yang. Do the things of heaven and earth. I knew my Jojo is the most obedient." As Crown Prince spoke, he had already hugged his little wife and kissed her deeply. After kissing for a while, he lowered his head to look at her. He blinked and smiled. "But Jojo, why are you stuttering?" Who stuttered? "Are you nervous, Jojo?" What a joke. I'm nervous." "If you're not nervous, then you're always stuttering." I'm stuttering." Mo Lien almost burst out laughing, but when she saw the little girl's tense little face, she couldn't help but reach out to stroke her face affectionately. "Don't be afraid, Jojo. Your husband won't hurt you. Husband loves Chow Chow the most. My heart, my soul, my everything, all belongs to you." His voice became low and muffled. "Jojo, Jojo," the crown prince's body suddenly sank, and Lord Chow Chow's cry of surprise was instantly swallowed into his mouth, completely swallowing it. She suddenly reached out to grab him, and tears were about to seep out of the corners of her eyes. He was a big liar. "Didn't you say you loved Jojo the most?" "Liar, big liar." He held her small hand in his, and as their fingers intertwined, she felt a warmth invading her. Her palm, no, her body, felt as if it was about to burn. The little crown princess was a little dizzy. She felt as if her body was floating on the sea. She was drunk and hazy. It was night, and the red candles were high up in the sky. Inside and outside the Eastern Palace, the place was brightly lit. Heaven and earth turned upside down, drunken dancing in the spring breeze, a high bed with soft pillows. The night went on until dawn the next morning. The candle burned out, leaving behind only a tear. The palace was filled with a faint fragrance that could not be dispersed. The little stoic moved her fingers and opened her eyes in a daze. Her long eyelashes fluttered slightly like a butterfly's wings, flapping again and again, but she couldn't muster up any energy. His somewhat unfocused eyes gradually came into focus. An enlarged, bright, and spirited face was right above her head. At this moment it was looking at her with a smile, and its phoenix eyes were filled with deep affection. There were still 2 talismans floating on his forehead. Binding talisman. The little stoic flung a talisman at his head with a smack. The man chuckled and took down the 3 floating talismans on his forehead. He looked at her innocently and said, "Darling, can we not greet each other with the immobilizing, binding, and sleeping talismans?" Stinky liar. The little stoic groped around, wanting to grab the thin blanket next to her. Crown Prince Mo pulled her small hand over and grasped it tightly, hugging her soft and small body as he asked in a low voice, "Chow Chow, are you cold? Your husband will warm you up." Chapter 3666. The little stoic was infuriated. She reached out to push him, but her entire body felt exhausted. She felt like her bones were falling apart the moment she moved, and she didn't feel comfortable anywhere. When Mo Lien saw that the little fellow really didn't have any strength left, his heart instantly tightened. He picked her up and walked towards the warm pool in the inner room. "Jojo, don't worry. Hubby will help you bathe and you'll feel better in a while." Sir Jojo looked at him expressionlessly. Suddenly, she opened her mouth and bit his chin. "Look at the situation now. Don't we still have to go to Yongren Palace today? If they went late, that elderly lady would definitely be nosy again. What's the rush?" Mo Lien carried her towards the pool and lowered his head to kiss her moist jade lips again and again. "Jojo, hubby will help you bathe and change your clothes. Be good." Sir Jojo pushed his face away and grumbled angrily, "I'm telling you, the medical scriptures say that there must be restraint in matters of yin and yang. Just like you did last night, like that." "Humph. That won't do." Prince Mo turned around and looked at her innocently. "Wife, then let's be more intense tonight. I'll perform better. I'll make you think I can do it, okay?" "What did you say?" Astonishment instantly colored Arbor's taut and expressionless face. Did this fool not understand the little emperor's words? She already begged for mercy like this last night. Humph. I'll tell Imperial Aunt. She shouted angrily, "Imperial Aunt promised me last time that if you bullied me, she would take care of you on my behalf." Mo Lien's face became even more innocent and serious. "I already begged you to stop running around, so why are you so disobedient? You just had to crawl around and pinch me. You're clearly the one bullying me. You always bully me for not knowing how to resist, relying on the fact that you're my treasure. My little emperor, your excellency, you only know how to bully me, torture me, and rub my heart." "What?" Sir Jojo looked at him incredulously, completely unaware that he was currently soaking in water. His soft body was currently being held in a certain someone's arms, and he was openly touching him. Does this guy still have any shame? From yesterday until now, who was the one tormenting who? The little stoic expressionlessly glared at him for a while before suddenly discovering that this guy seemed to have become lively again. "You. Jojo, don't worry. We'll try our best to correct our mistakes. We'll be more compatible in the future. Last night was mainly because it was our first night, so it was inevitable that we were inexperienced." The little stoic irritably pinched him. "Don't mess around. It was already late in the morning. Are we still going to Yongren Palace?" "How annoying," Prince Mo muttered and whispered into her ear, "It's fine if you don't go." Arbor glared at him. "Hurry up." Mo Lien pursed her lips. After helping her clean up, she carried her to the side of the pool and helped her put on some clothes. By the time the two of them finished dressing up, 2 hours had already passed. After they entered the carriage hand in hand, the little girl glanced at him. "Did anything happen yesterday?" It was so calm that Sir Jojo was at a loss. "Not a single one of those troublemakers has come out." Mo Lien smiled at her. "Jojo, what do you think could have happened?" At the same time. Clang. The iron door was pushed open from the outside to the inside with a loud sound. An inhuman roar came from inside. The iron chains connected to it shook vigorously, making clanging sounds. Ow. Chapter 3667. This was a courtyard located on the outskirts of the capital. From the outside, it looked like a very ordinary courtyard. However, it was actually a dungeon used by the Purple Forest Guard to imprison special criminals. It was built with 1/2 meter thick limestone and was impenetrable. With a light clang, the iron door was pushed open by 2 guards. A slender figure walked down the stone steps. The inside of the dungeon was very spacious, and torches were placed on all 4 walls. The circular platform was like the main hall of the dungeon. It was very clean and lit up by the torches. If it weren't for the various torture instruments hanging on the walls and the smell of blood, one wouldn't be able to tell that this was a dungeon. Ah! A hoarse roar came from the depths of the wooden fence. One of the guards outside the door impatiently poked the fence with his long stick and shouted angrily, "Shut up! Don't make a sound!" Ah! The person who was poked by the staff was immediately struck by the electric current. His body trembled uncontrollably as he screamed miserably. This person's luxurious blue robes were already dirty beyond recognition. It was as if he had been fished out of a pool of stinky water, and his entire body was filled with the smell of mold and decay. Where was his previous clean, tidy, and high-spirited existence? The slender figure walked down the stone steps and finally stood in front of the wooden fence. His slightly raised peach blossom eyes were filled with mockery and ridicule. He just stared coldly at the man who was screaming hysterically inside. What, is it because the guards here didn't take good care of you? Is that why Big Brother is so angry? The voice passed through the wooden fence. It was as if a basin of ice water had been poured over the person inside, freezing him to the bone. He dragged the heavy iron chain and turned around abruptly. His eyes were filled with shock and horror. It's you. It's you. His hand subconsciously reached for the fence. However, as soon as he touched the fence, he was stimulated by the strong electric current coming from the fence. He quickly withdrew his hands and took several steps back. The person inside the fence stared with wide eyes. It was as if the person in front of him wasn't a handsome young man in plain clothes and a faint smile. Instead, he was a tiger, a wolf, a vicious beast. Rong. Rong Li. A suppressed roar came from his throat, and his hands involuntarily tried to grab the fence again. However, when he thought of the electric current, he couldn't help but shrink his arms in fear. His eyes were fixed on the figure outside the fence, and he said word by word, "It's you. Did you do all this? Why?" The person in the prison was none other than the Crown Prince of Tsangzhou, Rongli. Speaking of which, this unlucky guy had arrived in the suburbs of Dragonflame City yesterday. Unfortunately, before they could enter the capital, they were attacked by a group of people on the Shirley Slope. The other party's speed was very fast, and they also had two powerful god stone cannons. The Peak Immortal Venerable had to remind him that the best choice was to retreat temporarily under the bombardment of the divine stone cannon. After all, the strength of that Peak Immortal Venerable was greatly suppressed. It wasn't that he couldn't fight the two divine stone cannons head-on, but if he did so, he would also suffer great damage. It wasn't worth it. Since he had reached the Immortal Venerable realm, he naturally cherished his own reputation more than anyone else. Naturally, he wouldn't risk his life for Rongli over such a trivial matter. Chapter 3668. Hence, Rongli led his men to turn around and flee, but who knew that they would fall into a trap? Someone had planned out their escape route and set up several layers of formations on their way. The miserable Tsang province's crown prince and his subordinates were all separated from each other in these arrays and ended up in prison. Rongli. My subordinate, Venerable Immortal Jinshang, will definitely come to save me. Oh. Duan Yu curled his lips noncommittally as he looked at him with a spurious smile. In that case, you think you still have hope of being saved? Rong Li's body trembled slightly, but he stiffened his neck and stubbornly refused to admit his mistake. Of course. As long as Venerable Immortal Jinshang finds, all of you will be finished. Tisk tsk. Duan Yu shook his head with a smile and looked at him with pity. Eldest brother, you're almost 40 years old, so how can you be so naive? It looks like Empress Lu has protected you too well. How can the current you be my match when you're cowardly and foolish? You. What do you want to do? Do you know where this is? Duan Yu's slender fingers passed through the layers of electric fences and abruptly grabbed Rong Li's collar, pressing him against the wooden fences. Ah! A mournful scream instantly echoed in the dungeon. Sigh, look at you can't even endure this bit of hardship. Duan Yu's fingers caressed his collar and unhurriedly straightened it for him. He said with a grin, your mother still thinks you're a genius, but she doesn't know that you've been an idiot from beginning to end. If you mother and son didn't come to provoke me, I would have left you be. But you're both so stupid. He abruptly grabbed Rong Li's messy hair and slapped his head heavily against the fence. Then I can only send you on your way first. Don't worry, you mother and son will be reunited in the underworld very soon. Ah. Rongli clutched his face and flipped over on the ground. The electric currents all over his body struck him until he was on the brink of death, and his entire person was immersed in agony. This is a dungeon of the Purple Forest Guard in Dragonflame City. Duan Yu remained unruffled in the midst of chaos as he looked at Sungzhou's crown prince, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog. He said with a smile, "Eldest brother, let me show you something fun." "You, what are you doing?" "Ah." Rongli, who was curled up on the ground, was filled with fear. He looked at the handsome man in front of him with a calm expression, as if he was looking at an evil spirit that had crawled up from hell. Duan Yu gently swiped his hand in front of his eyes. In an instant, Rongli saw circles of water-like mirrors appear in front of him. A group of people appeared in the mirror image created by the demonic eye. They were surrounding a man in embroidered clothes as they walked out of the guest garden. When Rongli's gaze fell on the man who was surrounded by several people like stars surrounding the moon, his entire person felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he couldn't help but shudder. This person actually had the same face as him? Why? Ah! Rongli roared angrily as he slammed himself against the wooden fence, ignoring the unbearable pain of the electric currents. His entire face was filled with astonishment as he pointed at the man in the demonic eye mirror image and shouted stutteringly, "Rongli! Rongli, you despicable person, you actually found someone to impersonate me?" Duan Yu couldn't resist chuckling as he looked at him apathetically. Why get angry? Chapter 3669. You devil. Devil. Rongli's entire body trembled. He was so furious that his heart and lungs were about to explode. He truly didn't expect that his younger brother, who came from the lower star domain, would have the ability to scheme against him like this. No, it couldn't be. Someone would definitely come to save him. Venerable Immortal Jinshang's cultivation was so high, so he would definitely discover something different about him. That Venerable Immortal Jinshang you speak of is currently an honored guest of the Divine Province. Duan Yu couldn't resist giving him another blow and said with a chuckle, he probably doesn't have the leisure to care about your life or death. Do you know why Venerable Immortal Jinshang came here? He came from the holy region, so it's naturally because there's something here that attracts him. For such a greedy person, as long as you can pay the price, Duan Yu smiled faintly and said, he can change masters anytime and anywhere. What do you want to do? Rongli instantly panicked. As he looked at Duan Yu, who was coldly glaring at him, his entire body started trembling weakly. Don't panic. A silvery white flame suddenly ignited in Duan Yu's hand, and he smiled calmly at Rongli. Don't worry, you won't feel anything. Don't kill me, fourth brother, don't kill me. Rongli abruptly prostrated himself on the ground. He no longer cared about his dignity and only wanted to beg someone to spare his life. He kowtowed to Duan Yu from the other side of the fence and wept bitterly, "Fourth brother, please spare me this once for royal father's sake. I won't dare to oppose you in the future. Fourth brother, spare me this time." To tell the truth, Rongli still couldn't figure out why Duan Yu's temperament suddenly changed and why he captured him and attacked him so viciously. He only thought that his mother must have done something to noble Consort Duan during the hunt and incurred his father's wrath. That was why he decided to kill him. When he thought of this, he couldn't help resenting his mother, Empress Lu. If she knew earlier that Duan Yu was a lunatic and not an easy person to get along with, why would she stupidly attack his mother time and time again? Wasn't this forcing him onto the path of insanity? Fourth brother. Rongli, whose messy hair was draped over his face, rolled and crawled to the fence. He stretched out his hand and begged sincerely, "Fourth brother, for the sake of Imperial Father, let me go this time. Don't worry, big brother will definitely turn over a new leaf. Not only will he not go against you, but he will also help you. He will definitely help you." Duan Yu smiled at him. This kind of nonchalant smile inexplicably made Rongli panic and fear. The person in front of him was really too terrifying. If he had known that this day would come, he would not have encouraged his mother to provoke him and his mother. Now, Rongli was trembling with regret. He climbed onto the fence that was filled with electricity. Enduring the pain on his face, he shouted, fourth brother, let me go this time. I promise, I will never go against you again. Fear made one's heart tremble. The Rongli before him didn't seem to have the slightest intention of resisting Duanyu. Eldest brother, what should I say about you? Duanyu smiled faintly at him, his voice extremely slow and gentle. You don't even know how to act. Duanyu sighed and shook his head. Chapter 3670. Look, you can't even suppress the ambition and resentment in your eyes. Duanyu chuckled softly. Then, he reached into the wooden fence and gently patted Rong Li's head. Rong Li's teeth were chattering, and he couldn't even finish his sentence. What are you doing? I'm looking at what's in your head. Duanyu said warmly, as though he wasn't talking about how to search his soul but was merely discussing with Rong Li about today's nice weather. No. Don't. Fourth brother. Rong Li burst into tears and repeatedly begged for mercy. What do you want to know? Tell me. I will definitely tell you everything I know. Oh. Duanyu glanced at him. Then why don't you tell me the purpose of your trip? Purpose? What purpose? Duanyu's expression was indifferent, and he exerted more force on Rong Li's head. Rong Li was so frightened that his entire body trembled. He repeatedly shouted, I'll talk. I asked Venerable Immortal Jin Shang and those two spirit venerables to capture the little stoic, the Crown Princess, and the Crown Princess. You also revealed the matter of the spirit domain to Jin Shang? Duanyu asked with a grin. No. Rong Li quickly shook his head. He wasn't stupid. If he revealed such an important matter to those three bigwigs, who knew if they would be tempted by the riches? At that time, he would be the one to seize the spirit domain. What would he, Rong Li, have to do then? I've already dealt with Ba Shu, who knew about this matter. You're quite ruthless. Ba Shu was his loyal lackey after all. He even offered that woman, Chen Baojia, to him and let him know about the matter of the spirit domain. Therefore, Rong Li acted without the slightest hesitation. I've told you everything. Fourth brother, can you let me go now? Duanyu smiled at him. This smile inexplicably made Rong Li feel a trace of apprehension. How can I be at ease without personally confirming it? He curled his lips mockingly. You're truly incomparably naive, eldest brother. Ah. Rong Li let out a long, mournful cry. In Duanyu's hands, her eyes kept rolling back as she convulsed. Very quickly, Rong Li's body fell to the ground. He lay on his back on the ground, his limbs twitching. Duanyu withdrew his hand and coldly glanced at the person on the ground before turning to walk out of the prison cell. Find a random place and burn it. Yes. Brat, a great man must be ruthless. As expected of a descendant of my Rong family. Ha, interesting. An old voice sounded in his mind. Duanyu knitted his brows and coldly ordered, Shut up. Kid. Don't be ungrateful. A faint shadow appeared beside him and snorted, If you are willing to cooperate with me, I believe that your cultivation will soar even faster in the future. I'm the only one who knows how to maximize the effectiveness of the bloodline. So long-winded. Scram. Duanyu clenched his fists, and that shadow glared at him before slowly dissipating. He strode out of the dungeon. Just as he entered the court, he saw the shadow appear in front of him in a flash. Your Highness, it's about time. Duanyu nodded and walked out of the court. He solemnly said, We'll act tonight. Chapter 3671. Inside Perpetual Benevolence Palace, Empress Dowager Chen's face was cold as she said, Crown Princess, it's a good thing that the wedding ceremony went smoothly yesterday. Otherwise, the entire imperial family would have become a laughingstock. The woman sitting at the side with a smile on her face hurriedly tried to smooth things over. The crown prince also rushed back at the last moment. Nothing went wrong. Both of them are blessed. Grand Concubine Fong's words are reasonable. The emperor nodded. Since the matter has been resolved smoothly, Empress Dowager need not be too harsh. Empress Dowager Chen couldn't help but roll her eyes. She hadn't even started to be harsh, but the emperor was already telling her not to be harsh. The emperor's protectiveness was too vexing. Prince Mo looked down at his sleepy wife and turned to the emperor. Imperial father, it's quite tiring to entertain the envoys from various countries tonight. Your son will be going back first. The emperor glared at him and waved his hand. Go on. Hold on. The crown prince pulled the crown princess and turned to leave. Empress Dowager Chen was furious. Crown prince, where is Alchemist Dan now? Empress Dowager Chen looked coldly at the young couple and said, I've been taking Alchemist Dan's pills to recuperate my body. I'm almost done eating, but Alchemist Dan still hasn't returned. Shouldn't the crown prince give me an explanation? Prince Mo smiled strangely at the old lady. Empress Dowager Chen suddenly had a bad feeling. She gripped the armrest of her chair tightly and asked with a stern expression, Crown Prince, why aren't you saying anything? Alchemist Dan came all the way from the capital to Greyfield Village for you. She came to help you exterminate those zombies. To help you treat the soldiers in the army. Even if she didn't help at all, you can't treat her so coldly. Mo Lien glanced at Empress Dowager Chen with an icy gaze and said indifferently, Empress Dowager, you meddle too much. Alchemist Dan disobeyed military orders and came to the army without permission. What a meddlesome act. Mo Lien coldly said. This crown prince has already dealt with him according to military law. I hope that the Empress Dowager will not act smart in the future. What did you say? Empress Dowager Chen's sharp nails dug into the wood as her eyes widened. Alchemist Dan went all the way to Greyfield Village to help you. She's just a young girl. How could you be so cruel to her? Mo Lien looked at Empress Dowager Chen with a cold smile. Empress Dowager, this one advises you to be a good Empress Dowager, don't do these little things. You won't be able to bear the consequences of angering me. After saying this, he didn't even look at Empress Dowager Chen, who was trembling with anger. He directly grabbed the little crown princess' hand and turned to walk out. Evil, evil creature. Evil creature. Empress Dowager Chen was so angry that she panted heavily. She turned to look at the emperor with a reproachful gaze. At this moment, the emperor had an awkward expression. He couldn't help but console her. Empress Dowager, little glutinous dumpling has always been this reckless since he was young. You don't know this, but when he was in the lower star domain, he was even more excessive to his adoptive father's wife. So, this old one should thank him for not being excessive? Actually, the crown prince is the easiest to talk to. Mo Lushing tried to smooth things over. As long as you understand this child's personality, you won't have any conflicts with him anymore. Chapter 3672. Empress Dowager Chen glared at the emperor in front of her. The emperor rubbed his nose and hurriedly said, It's actually very simple. As long as you don't provoke his wife, this child won't suddenly go berserk. Speaking of which, little glutinous rice ball is a very good-natured person. Mo Lushing said with a smile, completely ignoring Empress Dowager Chen's glaring eyes. Your son is good-natured? If he was good-natured, he would kill people without hesitation. If he was good-natured, he wouldn't even let the pitiful alchemist Dan off. If he was good-natured, how could he be so hostile to his grandmother? Good-natured my ass. Grand Concubine Fong coughed and said with a smile, That's true. The crown prince has just returned to the divine prefecture. Everything needs to be adjusted. Alchemist Dan is a god-level alchemist. If she can become the crown prince's concubine, our entire imperial family and all the disciples will be able to improve their cultivation after eating Alchemist Dan's pills. Who am I doing all this for? It's all for you and your father. Empress Dowager Chen said angrily, I'm not asking him to abolish the crown princess. I'm just taking in a concubine. With Alchemist Dan's status, it's wrong for her to be the Crown Prince's concubine. Mo Lushing sighed helplessly. He looked at Empress Dowager Chen and said, "Don't mention the matter of concubine in the future. Otherwise, the Crown Prince's relationship with you will only become worse." This old lady was good at everything, but she liked to meddle in other people's business. However, the older generation's idea of spreading their children couldn't be helped. Just like how this old lady wanted to shove Princess Yenyun to him time and time again, she also wanted to shove Shan Yi Su to Little Glutinous Rice Ball. Little Glutinous Rice Ball wasn't as peaceful as him. If this continued, the two of them would definitely fall out. Mo Lushing said this for the sake of the Empress Dowager. After all, Little Glutinous Rice Ball's methods were enough to give him a headache just by looking at the piles of information. Such a willful and reckless son was most likely led astray by his adoptive father's family. The palace banquet at night was arranged in the Feyue Pavilion. White jade and golden beads hung curtains. The ground was dug into a pool. Koi jumped in the pool, overflowing sparkling and translucent water droplets. It was already 10:00 in the evening. The pavilion was filled with fragrant underwear and fragrant hair, and people were toasting each other. From time to time, there would be laughter, singing, and dancing. After resting enough in the afternoon, the little Crown Princess was still in good spirits. After hearing the Crown Prince of Tsangzhou and Prince Chen's announcement, the little fellow glanced at the door. The Crown Prince of Tsangzhou walked in with a group of people with warm smiles on his face. The little Crown Princess felt that it was a bit hard to look at. Her gaze swiftly swept past him before shifting to Duan Yu behind him. Duan Yu, dressed in a moon-white plain robe, walked inside with a grin. The little stoic turned her head to look at Mo Yen, who was sitting next to her, and swept her small eyes over him in confusion. "You two exchanged a glance just now. What were you talking about?" Mo Yen was currently peeling tangerines for her, so he put on an innocent face when he heard this. "I didn't." "Humph. She must be hiding something from Jojo." Arbor turned to glare at Duan Yu. The latter winked at her with a smile before following Rongli up and bowing to the emperor before sitting down. The great emperor smiled and said a few polite words. Then, he clapped his hands and ordered the dishes to be served. No wonder the great emperor was so concise. Ever since the palace banquet turned into a gamble and all the ministers returned home hungry, the great emperor felt that with his daughter-in-law, who was a troublemaker, around, it was better to keep everything simple. Hurry up and finish eating so that the banquet could end and return home. Lord Preceptor of the State has arrived. Chapter 3673. The little stoic tugged at her husband's sleeve and whispered, "It's him who instigated your father to change the date of our wedding. I keep feeling that there's something off about this person." Mo Lien narrowed his eyes and glanced dangerously at the state preceptor who was just walking through the door. He also felt that this state preceptor was very strange. Normally, he acted like an immortal, but he felt like he was targeting his wifey. The little stoic accepted the tangerine that her husband had peeled for her and stuffed a piece into her mouth. She then turned to look at the little monk who had already started eating and was eating with gusto. The little fellow was squatting next to her with a round head, each paw holding a shortbread. His cheeks puffed up as he ate, and he even turned to look at her from time to time. "Benefactress, let's bring some food back for the little monkey later." Arbor nodded and pulled over his small hands to wipe them. "Kong Kong, your master Kong Yin said he wants to see you today. When you see him later, you should know what to say to him, right?" The little monk put down the shortbread in his hand and glanced at Arbor in confusion. "Benefactress, what does this young monk want to say to Master Kong Yin?" The little stoic's taut face revealed a bewildered smile. "Of course it's to fish for information from him. Think about it. Back then, Zhu Fan and his wife brought you to the Divine Province on First Elder's orders. But midway, you were attacked by a group of black-clothed people. What happened? Perhaps only that old bald donkey Kong Yin would know." The little monk pursed his small mouth into a straight line and said solemnly, "Benefactress, you said master is a bald donkey." On the side, Mo Lien couldn't resist twitching his mouth. Every time he heard these two's conversation, he had the urge to laugh. Arbor rubbed his bald head. Did you remember? The little monk nodded. I asked Master Kong Yin, who were those black-clothed people? Arbor nodded. Remember to ask when sister sends you to Kong Yin's table later. The little monk nodded his small head joyfully and asked with pursed lips, Benefactress, then can I still go back with you tonight? Sure. The small monk became even happier. He picked up the fruit on the plate and started to eat it. As long as the benefactress didn't throw him away, he could ask anything. Not long after, Grand Elder Kong Yin, who had arrived late, arrived along with a few other elders of the Elders' Council. At this moment, the state preceptor had just taken his seat. He turned his head to look at Great Elder Kong Yin and the others. He smiled and nodded slightly. Kong Yin stroked his long beard and looked at the imperial tutor. He nodded his head slightly and smiled. The little stoic stood up and pulled the little monk up. Her actions silenced the people who were enjoying the song and dance in the pavilion. Pairs of eyes immediately looked in her direction. This young crown prince consort truly wasn't an easy person to get along with. Thinking of how the young crown prince consort had caused them to not even be able to drink a mouthful of hot soup at the banquet last time, the officials couldn't help but want to cry for themselves. The dancers who were rapidly spinning in the hall all retreated a few steps and lowered their heads to make a path. The little stoic ignored the others and brought the little monk to the seat next to Great Elder Kong Yin. Great Elder Kong Yin immediately revealed a benevolent smile. Jojo, it's truly been a long time since we last met. Recently, this old monk has been busy preaching scriptures and discussing Tao, so I haven't spoken to you for a long time. Chapter 3674. The little stoic harumphed and stuffed the little monk next to him before returning to her seat. The old monk and the little monk exchanged glances. The little monk asked crisply, Master, benefactress wanted me to ask you, who exactly attacked me in north-facing Great Forest last time? The old monk looked at him solemnly and said, Kong Kong it's not time for you to know about this yet. That's right, did you encounter any trouble while staying by Jojo's side recently? The little monk immediately nodded and said in a childish voice, Benefactress herself is a little trouble. Kong Yin probably won't reveal the truth to the little monk. When Mo Lien saw her walk back, she chuckled and grasped her small paw. Besides, who would go and inquire about information so openly? The little fellow's curiosity was already written all over her face. There must be something strange about Kong Kong's background. Arbor harumphed and said, The old monk knows but doesn't say anything. It truly makes one feel conflicted. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh and pinched her small hand. The old monk will definitely let Kong Kong continue to follow you for a while. The little stoic immediately threw the smiling head Elder Kong Yin across from her with a disdainful look. He wanted her to help look after Kong Kong but didn't tell her anything. As expected, this old man had a good plan. Seeing the little crown princess sit down and continue eating, everyone's suspenseful hearts finally eased back into their stomachs. It turned out that the crown princess only walked out to say a few words to head Elder Kong Yin. Everyone couldn't help but blush. Why did they feel like nothing good happened whenever the little crown princess stood up? Just as they were pondering, they saw a plump eunuch running in with quick steps from outside the pavilion. His forehead was even stained with sweat as he reported breathlessly, Your Majesty, the third city lord of the City of Shadows has come to visit. Mo Lushing raised his brows, but before he could speak, a hearty laugh entered everyone's ears. Duan Yu turned to look and saw a black-clothed middle-aged man wearing a thick cloak walking in with a big grin. Behind him were two young attendants and a woman with a black veil over her face who was walking gracefully. The woman's entire body was wrapped in a long black dress, and her face was covered with a black veil. The ornament on her head was actually a black datura flower. As soon as he walked into the pavilion, he naturally attracted the attention of many people. This woman's attire was too out of place in this place of music and dancing. He did not fit in with the people around him. Moreover, the third city lord of the City of Shadows was wearing a cloak. It was already June, how could he wear such a thick cloak? Perhaps there was some hidden illness in his body. Mo Lucian coldly looked at these uninvited guests. His gaze fell on the Third City Lord for a long time before he suddenly laughed. "Third City Lord, why have you suddenly come to visit?" Everyone below started whispering to each other. Phantom City was one of the 4 great cities that transcended the 3 provinces. Their Third City Lord suddenly came to visit the Emperor today. Why did he come so abruptly? He probably came with ill intentions and didn't come with good intentions. Ing bent down slightly and whispered into Duan Yu's ear. The latter nodded. Detain him first. As for the rest, wait until the banquet is over. Ing nodded and took a step back. Taking advantage of the fact that everyone's attention was on the group of people from Phantom City, he swiftly left the pavilion. Chapter 3675. Phantom City's Third City Lord chuckled and suddenly tore open the large cloak draped over his body, revealing a treasured armor embroidered with golden threads and forged from silver crystals. His aura rose from his entire body like a mountain torrent. Everyone in the hall immediately felt as if their chests were blocked by something, so stifling that they almost couldn't breathe. Your Majesty, you are also very clear that my Phantom City transcends the 3 provinces. The Third City Lord sneered. If this matter didn't concern my beloved disciple, I wouldn't have come to find you like this. The smile on Mo Lucian's face rapidly receded. He pressed down with both hands, instantly dispelling the pressure released by the Third City Lord. If you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to release your aura right away. Mo Lucian was the most impatient with these people's behavior. If there was something, just say it clearly. What was the point of releasing your aura right away inexplicably and pressuring a group of ordinary people? Phantom City's Third City Lord's behavior caused a trace of coldness to emerge in Mo Lucian's heart. The Phantom City was beyond the 3 prefectures. However, his Mo clan's royal family wasn't someone that could be bullied and humiliated by others. If this Third City Lord continued to be so impudent, Mo Lucian wouldn't mind teaching him a lesson. Humph. The Third City Lord harumphed coldly, and his gaze abruptly landed on the little stoic. Hence, everyone fearfully cast their gazes in the little crown princess's direction. They saw that she simply didn't care about what was happening in the hall and was currently using a bamboo skewer to stab the prawn meat on her plate with her head lowered, eating it piece by piece. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and they reflexively turned to look at His Highness the Crown Prince's sullen expression. Mo Lucian was currently knitting her brows as she looked at the Third City Lord standing in the middle of the pavilion. This person's hostile gaze towards his wifey made him feel displeased, so he said coldly, "If you keep glaring at our Crown Princess, be careful of those eyes of yours." All the ministers' hearts skipped a beat, and they all lowered their heads and silently watched, not daring to make a sound. Everyone was very clear that His Highness the Crown Prince's earlier words weren't a joke. He was genuinely warning Phantom City's Third City Lord. However, it was clear that the Third City Lord did not take the Crown Prince's words to heart. Hearing this, he laughed out loud. What an arrogant and high-spirited Crown Prince of the Divine Land. His cold gaze fell on Prince Mo as he sneered, "No wonder you abandoned my disciple like a worn-out shoe." At this time, Empress Dowager Chen, who was sitting at the head of the table, could not help but say, "Third City Lord, what are you talking about?" After Alchemist Dan entered the capital, we have always treated him with respect and did not dare to neglect him in the slightest. The Third City Lord suddenly pointed in the direction of Mo Lucian and said in a stern voice, "Today, I came here to seek justice for my disciple." Disciple. The black-veiled woman in black from head to toe slowly made her way to the front of the crowd. She reached out and took off the black veil on her face, revealing half of her hideous scarred face. Empress Dowager Chen almost could not sit still and almost jumped up from her seat. She exclaimed, "Alchemist Dan. What happened to your face?" Empress Dowager Chen blurted out in alarm, her eyes hastily looking at the expressionless young crown princess and Prince Mo. The little stoic swept an inexplicable glance at that single-robed woman before retracting her gaze. Whether this woman's face was injured or not had nothing to do with her at all. She did not even bother to ask. She must have provoked Jojo's Lotus and was taught a lesson by Lotus. Chapter 3676. Mo Lien was also a little surprised at this time. Under such a huge impact of the fire glass, this Shan Yi Su could actually escape unscathed. He had seen with his own eyes that she was buried in the valley by those huge rocks. Does the Crown Prince find it very strange? Shan Yi Su's eyes were filled with hatred, firmly fixed on Mo Lien's face. Susu is not dead, I've disappointed your highness. What the hell? The little crown princess muttered expressionlessly. Whether she was dead or not, Jojo's lotus wouldn't care at all. So she really didn't know where this disappointment came from. The third city lord of the City of Shadows took a step forward and said to Mo Lusheng, my disciple was personally harmed by your son. Your highness, you invited my disciple here, but now you're treating her like this, don't you think it's too much? Then why don't you ask your good disciple why this crown prince wanted to kill her? Mo Lien looked coldly at the third city lord. If she hadn't poisoned this crown prince beforehand, why would this crown prince lower himself to her level? The implication was that if your disciple hadn't come to provoke me, I wouldn't have even bothered to look at her. The third city lord was so angry that his face trembled violently. He cupped his hands and shouted at Mo Lusheng, your country's crown prince treated the people of the City of Shadows like this, shouldn't he give corresponding compensation? When everyone heard this, their eyelids twitched slightly. There was no other reason, but now all the big shots in the imperial capital were obviously more sensitive to the word compensation. How do you want to compensate? The little crown princess suddenly spoke out, which was unexpected to everyone. Her calm attitude couldn't help but make people take a few more glances at her. This didn't feel like the crown princess's usual character. The third city lord arrogantly raised his chin. The crown prince must marry my Shan Yi Su with a great gift. And confer her as a second wife. Suddenly, there was an uproar. Everyone looked at the third city lord with an expression as if they had seen a ghost. There was no such thing as the crown prince having an equal wife in the divine land. Duan Yu gripped his wine cup with one hand as he looked at Prince Mo, whose face was as still as water, with ridicule in his eyes. You've provoked a peach blossom in front of Sir Jojo. The latter glared at him a few times, then retracted his gaze. A cold smile appeared on his lips, and he said to the third city lord, say that again. The third city lord felt an invisible pressure. Although his face did not change much, his heart could not help but beat like a drum. The crown prince of the divine land was so imposing. If it wasn't for Shan Yi Su, his disciple, who had offered him many precious medicinal herbs, he wouldn't have bothered to get involved in this mess for her. What do you think, state preceptor? The young crown prince consort suddenly turned to look at the smiling state preceptor sitting at the side. The latter was slightly taken aback. All the elders in the pavilion were also shocked by this little crown princess who did not play by the rules. The crown princess didn't make fun of anyone today? Could it be that after marrying the crown prince, she had toned down her temper? Thinking about it, it didn't seem likely. Everyone shook their heads as they looked in the Grand Tutor's direction. Sir Grand Tutor smiled faintly and raised his cup at everyone. Naturally, there can only be one crown princess. The position of the crown prince's concubine is fine. You can't. An elder in the hall immediately objected. This woman's face is disfigured, so how can she be promoted to the crown prince's concubine? Sir Grand Tutor said indifferently, since she calls herself a divine physician, she naturally can save her face. Chapter 3677. Why don't we set a limit of 1 month? If Alchemist Dan can cure her face within this month, then what's wrong with the crown prince taking her in as a concubine? The young crown princess's eyes instantly emitted a ferocious glint. Without another word, she raised her hand and threw an icicle arrow in Lord State Preceptor's direction. Seeing this, the crown prince raised his finger and lit a fire behind his wifey, directly throwing a black fireball in Lord State Preceptor's direction. Bang! Bang! After 2 loud noises, the State Preceptor dodged expressionlessly. The place where he was originally sitting was pierced by a sharp icicle, and the chair was blown up by the fireball. Everyone, the State Preceptor looked at the couple innocently. What are you doing? Duan Yu couldn't resist twitching his mouth as he sized up the state preceptor. This guy also seemed to be a bit shameless. Who would have thought that he would pretend to be innocent despite his graceful and divine appearance? The young crown princess sneered at him. Don't think that us husband and wife don't dare to beat you up just because you're the state preceptor. Speak, who exactly are you for opposing me time and time again? The state preceptor's expression became even more innocent. I'm the state preceptor of the divine province with an inheritance. Ask His Majesty if you don't believe me. I've stayed in Dragon Flame City for several decades, so who else can I be? I'm naturally the state preceptor. You're quite similar to someone. The little girl's bright eyes flickered, and a sharp icicle appeared in her hand. Suddenly, she stomped her leg and pounced in the state preceptor's direction like a lion cub, stabbing the icicle in her hand without hesitation. Shan Isu is a person blessed by the heavens. You racked your brains to shove this woman into my husband's arms. I'm sure everyone knows your intentions. Don't slander me. Lord State Preceptor blinked and couldn't resist turning to look at the Emperor, repeatedly complaining about his injustice. Your Majesty. When the Crown Princess asked me before, I only answered truthfully. How can this be connected to the heavens? Now that the Crown Princess suddenly attacked Lord State Preceptor, isn't it a bit unreasonable? Empress Dowager Chen's old face was already pale. She was so angry that she gripped the armrest and said, "Presumptuous, truly presumptuous. Kill him." The young Crown Princess ordered coldly. In the blink of an eye, a giant white squirrel with 5 tails pressed down on the imperial tutor. The holy beast's aura instantly enveloped the entire pavilion, causing everyone's expression to change. Shan Isu's expression also changed, and she couldn't help but take a step back. I gave you face, but you don't want it. With a flying stride, Xiaomu arrived in front of that unlined garment in a flash and picked up her arm like she was picking up a chick. With a kick of her leg, Shan Isu was kicked to the ground. She fell to the ground on all fours. Without another word, the little stoic went up and slapped the back of that man's head. Shan Isu let out a scream. She twitched on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. It was evident how ruthless and merciless this young crown princess was. She made alchemist Shan bleed with a single slap. Empress Dowager Chen's eyes instantly widened, and she abruptly stood up. She pointed in the young crown princess's direction and shouted shakily, "Impudent, truly presumptuous. Why aren't you stopping?" The Grand Crown Princess actually beat up alchemist Shan in court like a shrew in the marketplace. The elderly lady felt her entire body tremble from anger. Chapter 3678. The little stoic turned a deaf ear to elderly lady's berating. She pursed her lips and kicked that alchemist Dan to death in displeasure, a hint of coldness hanging on her tranquil face. She had never seen such a shameless thing. She actually dared to openly reach out to snatch Jojo's lotus? Did she want to die, or did she want to die? Stop, quickly stop. Seeing that his disciple was beaten to the brink of death by the little crown princess, the third city lord hastily berated loudly. The third city lord's aura shook, and a wisp of sacred energy swiftly attacked the little stoic. Mo Lian's eyes revealed a cold glint, and he had already pulled his wifey into his arms in a flash. With a raise of his hand, the surging sacred energy counterattacked the third city lord. The third city lord was instantly shocked, and treacherous waves surfaced in his eyes. He simply didn't expect that the crown prince of the divine province had already entered the transcendent god realm at such a young age. It was already too late to evade, and what was even more frightening was that another wisp of sacred energy secretly attacked him from behind. A pincer attack from the front and back instantly shook his mind. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his complexion immediately wilted. The third city lord got off to a bad start, and his eyes were as wide as an ox's as he glared fiercely at the two people who attacked him at the same time. Duan Yu remained calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos as he looked at him and said while shaking his head, "Pitiful and lamentable people must have something hateful about them." On the other side, the white squirrel Chirpy and Lord State Preceptor had also decided the victor. Don't be fooled by the little white squirrel's round body. It was nimble, and the sapling's vine supported it from time to time. Even though Lord State Preceptor was nimble, he was still pushed back by the two of them. In the end, the little white squirrel's tail whipped the State Preceptor's back, causing him to rapidly retreat several steps. When he turned around, everyone couldn't help but be inwardly shocked when they saw blood trickling down from the corner of his mouth. Everyone stop. Seeing that the situation was out of control, the emperor berated and abruptly stood up. Simply insolent. Queen Dowager Chen was so angry that her chest heaved up and down, and her face was ashen. Your Majesty, the crown princess is truly too, imperial father, I was the one who did it. Prince Mo's cold voice interrupted Empress Dowager Chen's harsh words. When this woman chased me all the way to Grey Ping village, this prince was already very impatient with her. I didn't expect to fail in killing her and let her escape. Now that she's walking right into the trap, that's perfect. Men, come. Mo Lien coldly called out. Several agile purple forest guards immediately rushed behind him and cupped their fists in greeting. Drag this woman out and execute her immediately. What a troublesome thing. Mo Lien's eyes turned cold. The third city lord sneered, arrogant indeed. Does the crown prince want to declare war on the city of shadows? Oh. If the city of shadows insists on standing up for this ignorant woman, then this crown prince is not a coward. Then the crown prince should listen to your grandfather's opinion first. As the third city lord's voice fell, a tall old man who looked to be around 70 suddenly flew in from outside the Feiyue pavilion and stood in the middle of the hall with a cold expression. The old man's face was resolute, his short hair sharp, and his blue robe was very simple. You can't kill her. The old man's cold gaze swept over Shan Isu as he took out several materials from his inner world. Pill Master Shan, if you fail to make the soul-returning pill, don't blame this old man for being ruthless. Shan Isu's body trembled slightly. Chapter 3679. Arbor's gaze sharpened. Just as he was about to take a step forward, Mo Lien pulled him back to her side. Grandfather, you have to think clearly. There's only one set of these ingredients. If it's wasted, it'll be a waste. Mo Lien said coldly, the success rate of Shan Isu's soul-returning pill is currently less than 10%. You're asking her to refine the pill on the spot. Isn't that a joke? Mo Lien glanced at the pale Shan Isu. That bloodshed vermilion fruit was given to Jojo by Jojo when Imperial Father was testing him. Otherwise, where would they find the bloodshed vermilion fruit? If I want to kill someone, even gods and Buddhas can't stop me. Arbor said coldly. This Shan Isu had already stepped on her bottom line. If she couldn't get rid of her with her own hands, where would she put her face? She had already brought her master to snatch her husband. If she didn't fight back, wouldn't she be a coward? Naturally, this matter couldn't be settled peacefully. Even Lotus's grandfather couldn't stop her determination to kill Shan Isu. At this moment, Shan Isu also calmed down. She was beaten black and blue by the little crown princess, and her eyes were narrowed into a line. She turned to look at the little crown princess and smiled coldly. Then, she turned to look at Mo Lien's grandfather. City Lord Bai, there's no problem if you want me to refine the soul-returning pill. It's just that there's a small problem with your ingredients. Elder Bai Xing frowned and looked coldly at Shan Isu. What's the problem? Phoenix wood, ghost grass, snowfield flower, and bloodshed vermilion fruit. Everything is here. What other problem can there be? Following the elder's announcement, gasps could be heard in the hall. Everyone knew what these 4 types of medicinal herbs represented. Phoenix wood, snowfield flower, and ghost grass were all ingredients that were infinitely close to divine level. As for the bloodshed vermilion fruit, it was a type of divine spirit fruit. It was unbelievable that old Master Bai had really collected all the ingredients needed for the soul-returning pill all these years. Everyone looked at the few jade boxes in front of the old man, and their gazes immediately became fervent. The soul-returning pill was an item that could reverse yin and yang. It was rumored that it was a panacea that could truly revive the dead. Of course there's a problem, and a very big one at that. Shan Yi-su took a deep breath and took a step forward. He bent down and took out one of the jade boxes and opened it, allowing everyone to see the half of the pitch-black phoenix wood inside. The entire body of the phoenix wood was ink black, and the broken branches were faintly tinged with light green. It looked like moldy spots. The phoenix wood needed to concoct the soul-returning pill must be the heart of a 1,000-year-old phoenix wood. This is only a 100-year-old phoenix wood, Shan Yi-su said indifferently. Its medicinal value is not enough to refine the soul-returning pill. Everyone was stunned, and then they looked up at old Master Bai, whose face was as dark as water. Obviously, old Master Bai was in a bad mood when he heard this bad news. But don't worry, old master. Since we're only missing the phoenix wood, we'll be able to find it in a month or two. Shan Yi-su smiled faintly, and the scars on his face looked somewhat hideous. Old master, you can give me some manpower. I'll lead them to the Phoenix Forest in the Divine Continent to search for the Phoenix clan's habitat. In time, they'll definitely help you find the truly useful 1,000-year-old phoenix wood. You won't live to see that day. Chapter 3680. Arbor's cold voice abruptly spread throughout the entire pavilion. Everyone's hearts, which had been ignited by the 4 god-tier and above medicinal herbs, inexplicably cooled down in an instant. Elder Bai's eyes were slightly angry. He turned to look at his granddaughter-in-law, his pair of bright old eyes revealing traces of light. She must stay alive to find the phoenix wood. Before the end of this year, she must concoct the soul-returning pill that Asya needs. Arbor sneered coldly. Her? Ha! What kind of attitude is that? Elder Bai was instantly angered by Sir Jojo's arrogance. If I say she can't, then she can't, Arbor said coldly. If I say I want to deal with someone from Tianyun, then I must deal with her. It's useless for anyone to stop me. Bastard! Elder Bai roared angrily. Take this person down, Arbor said coldly in a low voice. Instantly, countless figures approached Shan Yi-su, whose expression had changed abruptly. Who dares to make a move? Third City Lord was anxious. He couldn't help but turn to Elder Bai and shout, Old City Lord, are you just going to watch a god-tier alchemist fall in front of you like this? Bai Xing's face was ashen. He suddenly leaped to Shan Yi-su's side and pressed his palm on her left shoulder. A strong burst of holy power burst out from his body, instantly flinging away a dozen purple forest guards who had swarmed over. Mo Lien secretly cried out in his heart. He didn't even have time to give Elder Bai a look, and Elder Bai had made such an impulsive move. Sure enough, when he lowered his head, he saw that his little wife's expression was incomparably ugly. Before he could react, he saw the little fellow rush over. With a flick of her hand, hundreds of forced binding talismans were thrown over. He shouted angrily, the person who dares to stop me in this world hasn't been born yet. Today, whoever dares to stop me from killing her will be my, Arbor's, mortal enemy. If you want to come, then come at me together. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of flickering talisman arrays smashed down at the same time, tightly trapping Elder Bai and Shan Yi-su in place. At the same time, the old man's expression changed abruptly, and his saint energy crackled. Arbor's figure flashed, and he was already in front of the old man. She stood in the air in front of everyone. Her red clothes fluttered in the wind, and her icy eyes were filled with anger. The 10th jade slip of the golden talisman Jade Tome was activated during the battle. Arbor's finger naturally moved in the air, and a blue talisman suddenly formed in the air. In the blink of an eye, it flew in front of the old master. After so many years of diligent practice and experience, a heaven-level great symbol master had naturally achieved void talisman drawing. Bang! The attack talisman formed in the void formed a small storm, and heavily swept in front of the old man. If it was not for the old man's large-scale Saint Power defensive shield that blocked the attack, Shan Yi-su would have been dead by now. Mo Luxing immediately jumped up from the dragon throne, his eyes staring at his daughter-in-law in shock, forgetting to speak for a long time. Void talisman crafting. Void talisman drawing. Without any external assistance, no talisman brush, and no cinnabar, she simply drew a blue attack talisman in the void and threw it at the old man. This was a true talisman crafting genius. At this time, the people of the aristocratic families in the hall all stood up. Everyone on the Mu family's side stared at the little crown princess without blinking, their eyes revealing a shocked expression. Chapter 3681. Creating talismans out of thin air was a unique skill that had been lost for a long time. In the past, they had only read about it in ancient texts. After a great talisman practitioner absorbed and communicated with the chi of heaven and earth, it was possible that they could create talismans out of thin air. But flipping through ancient texts was one thing. Seeing it before their eyes was another matter altogether. Everyone was staring at the little girl in front of them in shock. Truly, the little crown princess's sudden outburst shocked everyone, and they also felt as if their hearts had suffered a heavy blow. This heavy atmosphere weighed down on everyone's mood during the new year. The little crown princess expressionlessly stood in the air, her small hands flying back and forth, as nimble and beautiful as a butterfly fluttering through flowers. As her fingers moved, one blue attack talisman after another was produced. They gradually turned into purple talismans, purple talismans, purple talismans. Everyone's eyeballs were about to fall out of their sockets. They looked at the little crown princess, who was still exerting her strength, in bewilderment. They only felt that their eyes were not enough to see, and their hearts seemed to have been struck again. They revealed a hopeless expression. Was this the difference between a genius and a mediocre person? From creating talismans out of thin air to directly creating blue talismans out of thin air, then suddenly turning them into purple talismans. This process probably couldn't be described with a quarter of an hour. Patriarch Mu somersaulted and nearly fell to the ground. If it weren't for Mu Jingrui and Mu Jingyuan swiftly supporting him, the old patriarch would probably have already fallen to the ground. At this very moment, Arbor's surroundings had already been enveloped by a huge talisman energy vortex. She stood in the middle and coldly stared at old Master Bai in front of her, as well as Shanisu, who was being protected by him. Shanisu didn't know why, but she felt a sudden chill invade her heart. She didn't expect that a mere little girl could make her feel a trace of shudder and fear with just her aura pressure. She didn't want to admit it, but the truth didn't allow her to quibble. If you don't die today, how will I have the face to continue living in this world? Arbor coldly finished this sentence and raised her hand. Everyone saw a dazzling golden light radiate before their eyes, and it was as if it had stolen all the colors in the world in that instant. Mo Lien was greatly shocked. Just as she was about to run up, Duan Yu grabbed her arm. You brat, if you don't want to add fuel to the fire, then stand here and watch. Duan Yu glanced at him and patted his back. He looked at him sympathetically. It's better for your grandfather to suffer a bit than to suffer Jojo's disdain in the future. Mo Lien rolled her eyes at him. Do you think I'm going to stop them? If I go over to help her, Jojo will be at a disadvantage. The old man isn't someone easy to deal with. He was someone who was about to step into the ultimate god realm. If it wasn't for his mother, he would have ascended to the sacred region a long time ago. Duan Yu withdrew his claws and said with a nod, all right then, you go and lure your family's patriarch away. I'll go deal with that third city lord. The two of them glanced at each other. Just as they were about to make their move, they heard old Master Mu Jia exclaim. Saint-grade gold talisman. It's a saint-grade gold talisman. Everyone in the talisman patrician family couldn't resist prostrating themselves in worship. They put their palms together and exclaimed, a saint-grade gold talisman has appeared. It's a saint-grade gold talisman. At the same time, Arbor had already flicked open that saint-grade gold talisman summoning talisman. His chilly little face revealed a murderous intent. Eat her. Chapter 3682. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone suddenly felt as if the temperature around them had dropped below freezing point. The temperature that was supposed to be warm in June now felt as if winter had descended. Not only was it extremely gloomy and cold, but that chill also drilled into their bones, freezing them so much that they couldn't help but tremble and stomp. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and little Tai Sui took advantage of the chaos to appear beside Mo Lien and Duanyu. Because this abruptly chilling atmosphere instantly descended, completely covering the scent of the opening of the spirit domain. Thus, no one present noticed where these two extra people had popped out from. Bam! A shattering sound came from the roof of the Feiyue Pavilion. The ground trembled along with the tremors, causing everyone to feel dizzy. They couldn't even tell which direction they were in. Run, run. It was unknown which old lord risked his life to yell these words. All the fools immersed in the crisis instantly seemed to have received a unified command and hastily sprinted out of the Feiyue Pavilion. However, due to the earth quaking and mountain swaying, they ran crookedly and truly couldn't move very quickly. When they rushed to the entrance of the Feiyue Pavilion, their path was suddenly blocked by a pile of bricks and stones. The tiles and rubble at the entrance crackled as they fell. The two unlucky fellows running at the front were smashed in the face by the bricks and stones, and their heads bled as they screamed in fear. This time, everyone was so frightened that they stopped in their tracks and continuously retreated. In the end, they were forced back into the main hall of the Feiyue Pavilion. The chancellors were about to die from regret sure enough. Starting a fight at the slightest disagreement was truly something that the little crown princess was capable of. Didn't they say to finish eating early and leave early? Great, they only had enough time to eat 2 mouthfuls of hot soup and savor 3 pieces of meat before the banquet was freaking disrupted again. No one was to blame except for that damn third city lord of the City of Shadows. Why did you bring a woman to disgust the little crown princess for no reason? If this woman didn't appear, everyone would still be enjoying themselves. Little Tai Sui sniffed, and a serious look appeared on its delicate little face. I seem to smell the scent of a primordial beast. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist rolling his eyes. It's already here. Ah, Saint Claude Sue let out a scream, and then her voice suddenly stopped. There was no other reason. The void was torn open, revealing a mass of black mist. A sharp claw stretched out from within. It looked like a dragon, but it was not a dragon. It looked like a phoenix, but it was not a phoenix. Its claws and fangs were extremely sharp, and it tore through the old man's Saint Energy shield in an instant. Its claws landed on Shawnee Sue's body and it clawed with force. Ah! Saint Claude Sue let out a frightened scream. Then, he felt a chill on his left shoulder. A large piece of skin and bone was torn off by the claw, and blood and flesh were thrown to the ground. She was in so much pain that she couldn't speak. She rolled around on the ground. She glared fiercely at Arbor and screamed, "Lunatic, lunatic! You lunatic! Everyone in Tianyun is crazy. Everyone has the right to punish them." Arbor interrupted her coldly. What right do you have to say that I'm from Tianyun? I'm the disciple of the third city lord. I'm from the City of Shadows. Ah, that sharp claw stretched out from the mass of black mist again and tore off one of her arms, throwing it to the ground. Saint Claude Sue almost fainted on the spot from the pain. Your body has the smell of Tianyun, the little crown princess said coldly. Chapter 3683. What's so difficult about knowing if you're Tianyun's person or not? Arbor stood in the air, coldly looking at the woman in front of him without a trace of pity in his eyes. As long as we cut open your skull and rummage through it, we'll be able to see it. Tianyun's people will have a black crystal the size of a grain of rice in their skull. Arbor looked at her, a trace of coldness slipping through his lips, that 18th sister. We've researched it in our small base. The reason why she was able to run and jump while half of her body was because the tiny black crystal in her skull hadn't been destroyed. Xiaomu tapped her own head as she gazed icily at Shawnee Sue and said, to nurture such a young divine-level pill refiner in this world, the amount of money and time that Heavenly Fortune has invested, as well as a lot of time and energy, is probably not small. But you're too anxious. Anxious to get close to your goal, anxious to enter our core. Anxious to humiliate me, anxious to make my life uncomfortable for the mastermind behind the scenes, you're willing to be driven by others. You're so anxious, it's easy to reveal flaws. You're too stupid, so stupid that I can't bear to look at you. Tian Yun wants to make you into a god-level alchemist respected by the world. He wants to use your young alchemy skills to master the alchemy of the 3 states and become the leader of the Alchemist Alliance, right? But why do you have to provoke me at this time? Do you know the corpse puppet's crystal core? Arbor stretched out his little finger and tapped his little head. It's right here. When you kill the corpse puppet, you destroy its crystal core, and it will be completely useless like a useless puppet. And this little black crystal in your skull is the same as 18th Sisters. It's something that can be upgraded. It needs a lot of medicine to refine it. Normal days must be hard to endure. Arbor looked at her coldly. As an alchemist, you must have mastered a part of the core refining technique. If I ask you to tell the truth, Arbor's eyes instantly became incomparably cold, revealing traces of cold light. I don't know if the curse in your body will backfire and turn you into an idiot. No, ah. Shan Yi-Su fell to the ground and crawled back a few steps in fright. He waved his hand in front of his eyes and cried out in alarm, You devil, you won't have a good end. You vicious woman, you will not have a good ending. I didn't have a good ending a long time ago. Arbor pulled out a vine whip from his sleeve and slapped Shan Yi-Su's face heavily. I, who didn't have a good ending, crawled out from the depths of hell. He had passed through the gates of hell and walked through the sea of fire. Now is the time for you to tremble, be terrified, and scream. No, I'm not Tian Yun's person. I'm really not Tian Yun's person. Shan Yi-Su felt a deep sense of fear at this moment. She rolled and crawled, dragging a long trail of blood on the ground. She crawled towards Mo Lien and cried out with a pleading face, Your Highness, I'm really not Tian Yun's person. I only adore you wholeheartedly. It's Crown Princess, she's jealous by nature, it's her, nonsense. Before she could finish her sentence, she was kicked out by Mo Lien like trash. My Jojo, why should I be jealous of you? Who do you think you are? You can't even compare to a hair of hers. Chapter 3684. Who cares about your baffling adoration? It's simply disgusting to the extreme. If you dare to spout nonsense again, we will gouge out your tongue. Mo Lien bellowed, her eyes emitting a cold, electrifying glint. Single-clothed Su landed heavily on the ground, nearly fainting on the spot from the pain. But strangely, her head felt abnormally clear than at any other time. She felt 10 levels of pain all over her body, as if her entire body was suffering from the pain of 1,000 cuts. This inhumane torture actually didn't make her faint from the pain. Based on her intuition as a pill alchemist, she could clearly understand one thing now. The little crown princess in front of her had tampered with her body. Single-clothed Su shakily took out a medicine bottle from her sleeve. Just as she was about to open the bottle and take out a pill, her wrist was struck by a palm wind. Duan Yu walked up a few steps and kicked with the tip of his foot, scooping up that bottle and pouring it out to look at the pill. Mo Lien reached out to take it and threw it into the bottle before tossing it to Tong behind her. Send it to Beiwang Valley. Sending it to Beiwang Valley meant sending it to Mr. Su Shuetao at the small base. Research was still ongoing. One day, they would be able to completely grasp the medicinal trick of heavenly fate that tempered the human body and find a way to crack it. Single-clothed Su wept bitterly as she pounded the ground with all her might. She reached out to grab in the third city lord's direction. Ma master. However, the third city lord was somewhat strained at this time. He was being forced to retreat step by step by the little white squirrel, Chio, who was pestering him. How could he spare a hand to support her? Just as Bai Sheng was about to move, Mo Lien reached out to stop him. Grandfather, you still want to fight with the primordial ferocious beast? That primordial ferocious beast didn't even show its face earlier. It only revealed a claw from the black fog, and it tore open grandfather's defensive barrier. One could imagine how powerful its overall strength was. Jojo didn't use force on him because he was Lien's grandfather. If he really angered this little fellow, it would probably be disastrous. Bai Sheng's face darkened, and he angrily said to his grandson, "It doesn't matter if she's from Tianyun or not, she can save your mother." "She can't," Mo Lien sighed helplessly. "Grandfather, you're experienced and knowledgeable, so you should be very clear about this. The success rate of a god-level alchemist concocting the soul-returning pill was less than 10%. You must know that as well. Even if it's only 5%, I still have to try. Your mother can't afford to delay any longer." Bai Sheng was fuming with rage as he blurted out. Mo Liusheng's expression instantly changed. Mo Lien couldn't help but take a step forward and grab her grandfather's hand. "What did you say? Wasn't his mother safe and sound in the ice? What did he mean by he couldn't afford to drag it out? Ordinary nutrient solutions are completely useless to your mother." Elder Bai seemed to have aged a lot in an instant, and his entire person became dispirited. "Even if there's only a 5% success rate, there's still a 5% chance. Do you understand, little Mo? Your father was afraid that you would be worried, so he never told you. Your mother's situation has now reached a critical juncture of life and death." "I have a way," Arbor said coldly. Elder Bai was stunned, and then he abruptly turned to look at the little girl. This was the first time he looked at the little crown princess in front of him after entering Feiyue Pavilion. Such a young girl, but her aura was extremely strong. In his rage just now, the entire Feiyue Pavilion's thousands of people didn't dare to speak. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he intimidated everyone present. Chapter 3685. Bai Sheng's face showed a trace of puzzlement and even a hint of hesitation. "You just said you have a way?" "Yes." Arbor threw him a cold look with an expressionless face. From the moment the old man appeared until now, he had been standing on the opposite side of her. He didn't care about right or wrong, he just wanted to go against her and save Shan Yisu. This made her impression of old Master Lin drop to the bottom for a moment. Shan Yisu was of no help to Lien's mother at all, but he didn't listen to a word from others. What a stubborn old man. "If you don't believe me, ask her to make pills on the spot." Arbor said coldly, "Just ask her to make a god-level pill and see if she can make it." The third city lord turned his head angrily but was swept back a few steps by Chiochio's tail. "Don't you slander me. What you mean is that my city of shadows colluded with Tianyun?" "Ha!" The third city lord sneered, "Everyone knows that. My city of shadows transcends the 3 states and has never fought for fame and fortune. We have always lived our own idle lives. Why should we work for Tianyun?" "Shut up." The little crown princess turned her head and shouted angrily. "Don't you understand human language? It's her who wants to put the shit on her head. How much do you know about this disciple? How much do you know?" The third city lord's old face tightened. For a moment, he couldn't answer her question and looked embarrassed. Arbor waved his little hand and threw more than a dozen herbs in front of Shan Yisu. "Make it on the spot. If you can make it within an hour, I will spare your dog life." Shan Yisu struggled to move her body. At this time, she had a broken arm and a flower on her head. Her whole body was covered in blood and she looked quite miserable. Her eyes were full of hatred as she stared at the little crown princess in front of her. If her eyes could kill, she would probably swallow her into her stomach and chew her into pieces. "Are you kidding me?" Third city lord couldn't help but complain for his disciple. "There are so many medicinal herbs here, what kind of god-level medicinal pills do you want her to make? And it needs to be completed within 2 hours?" As everyone knew, which alchemist didn't have to spend a lot of time and effort to refine a pill? Some of them even worked their hearts out. "What? You don't even understand medicinal herbs?" Arbor smirked and pointed at the coiled medicinal herb in front of Shan Yisu. "What is this? Do you know him?" Shan Yisu covered her bleeding broken arm and glared at Arbor with anger in her eyes. She screamed, "You vicious woman, what do you want to do this time?" "Hemostasis pill." Arbor tilted his little head at her, his eyes coldly falling on her. "A divine tier hemostasis pill. You've never concocted one before, divine grade alchemist." She glanced at her mockingly. Shan Yi-su was stunned. Her eyes shrunk as she looked at the materials on the ground. Xiao Mu had tossed those materials on the ground like trash since they were small. There were grass, flowers, leaves, roots and even soil. It was a mess. She looked at it and felt that it was extremely messy. A divine-grade alchemist can't even differentiate the medicinal herbs used to make a divine-tier hemostasis pill. Arbor sneered and shook her head. This is really an eye-opener. Chapter 3686. Looking at the strange looks that other people were giving her, Shan Yi-su's face instantly paled. She knew that at this time, she had to show some persuasiveness. Otherwise, other people would think that she was a fraud through and through. You, what do you know? Shan Yi-su bit her lips hard, her eyes spitting fire. I never make low-level Dan like blood-stopping Dan. Low-level? Arbor crooked her finger at her. Look. Look clearly. She raised her little hand, and everyone felt a flash of light in front of their eyes. When they looked again, they saw a transparent glass cauldron floating above her little hand. The cauldron was completely surrounded by a glass-colored flame. This glass-colored cauldron fire looked very pure and beautiful. When it came out, all the fire attribute Shouja felt their bodies tighten. This was the suppressive power of the glass cauldron fire. This meant that this cauldron fire probably had more than 90% of its power, and was comparable to holy fire. Arbor casually sucked, and the medicinal herbs that had been scattered on the ground jumped up, and obediently arranged themselves in the air in front of her. The little girl casually took a medicinal herb and threw it in. In less than a second, it was swallowed by the cauldron fire, and turned into a medicinal liquid that flowed down. Then her movements were so fast that people were dazzled. In a flash, she had roasted all the medicinal herbs into liquid. She drew several seals on the cauldron with one hand. She murmured to herself, I found that when making Dan, seal masters can add purification seals to increase the quality of the medicinal liquid. In the past, I could only make purple vein Dan. Now, I can often make black vein Dan. Top grade black vein Dan? Shan Yi-su's face showed a twisted expression. What are you bragging about? However, before she could finish her sentence, the medicinal liquid in the other person's hands had already begun to condense into a pill. Impossible. Shan Yi-su shook her head, holding the broken part of her arm. She shook her head and shouted, Impossible. How is this possible? What Dan forming speed was this fast? Was this the Dan making speed of a ghost? An ordinary person would need half a day to refine the most common medicinal pill, let alone a divine-grade medicinal pill, okay? Usually, when Shan Yi-su followed the prescription given by others to refine the god-level medicinal pill, he could complete it within a day. However, there were prerequisites. The premise was that someone else had already helped her classify the medicinal herbs and purify the medicinal liquids in order. She only needed to combine them and use the cauldron fire to condense the elixir. Would a divine-grade alchemist like her still need to do those most basic tasks? However, if she were to do the basic work, from the beginning of refining the medicinal liquid to the end of condensing the pill, it would only take a day. Not to mention one day, he didn't even know if he could complete it in 3 days. Moreover, how could there be no mistakes in this process? It was as if he didn't even need to use his eyes to distinguish between them. This meant that the little crown princess was very familiar with the mutual promotion and suppression of medicinal properties. She did not need to distinguish them at all. Shan Yi-su looked at this crown prince consort who made people feel surprised with her gaze and horror. No, it can't be, it's impossible. There was no divine-grade alchemist who was younger than her in this world. I am the most famous divine-grade alchemist in the 3 continents. Shan Yi-su screamed with a twisted expression. Her eyes were fixed on the small glazed cauldron in Arbor's hand. Chapter 3687. The cauldron fire boiled for a while before suddenly spitting out a black-patterned, gold-plated pill. Everyone simultaneously sucked in a cold breath. Even old city Lord Bai, who was standing on the side with a baffled expression, widened his eyes in shock. Little glutinous dumpling. Mo Lushing anxiously grabbed his son's hand, his expression a bit agitated. Mo Lien forcefully pulled his hand away. With a cold expression, Prince Mo dryly said, "Royal father, pay attention to the situation." What was going on? Calling him by his pet name in a place with so many people, was she trying to court death or court death? On the side, Duan Yu's eyes clearly brightened, and he glanced at Mo Lien with a mocking expression, his face full of realization. "Oh. So little glutinous dumpling is your pet name." Mo Lien instantly glared at him in annoyance, but her father pulled her hand back when she turned around. "Little glutinous dumpling, why didn't you tell father earlier that your wife's pill refinement skills were so brilliant?" "I did." Mo Lien was baffled, and he glanced at the agitated Mo Lushing, saying, "Didn't I say before that my wife is an earth-grade alchemist?" But from the looks of it, his wifey's pill refinement level should have increased by quite a bit. She should have entered the ranks of heaven-grade alchemists now. "You didn't say she was this impressive before." Mo Lushing glared at his son in dissatisfaction. Mo Lien lowered his head in contemplation. His daughter-in-law indeed hadn't displayed her brilliant pill refinement skills in front of others before, so it was no wonder that these people were so shocked that their jaws were about to fall off. Thinking that this was his wifey, Mo Lien felt a bit pleased on the inside. This was his wifey, no one should think of fighting with him over her. What was his was his. "Royal father, Jojo's pill refinement is very arduous." Mo Lushing wanted to spit at his son's face. "Arduous, arduous my ass." Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the little crown princess refined a black-veined pill. From refining the medicinal liquid to forming the pill, it took less than a quarter of an hour. Was this considered hard work? Arbor reached out and grabbed the black-patterned gold-plated medicinal pill that jumped out and jumped into her palm. She turned to look at one of the two young men behind the third city lord. The two of them had been subdued by the purple forest guards at the start of the fight, and they were currently being held captive by several purple forest guards. They struggled with all their might and glared angrily at him. Xiao Mu gazed at them coldly. Her gaze was so frigid that it was as if she was looking at two corpses. However, it frightened the two youths who were struggling non-stop into immediately stopping their movements, and they couldn't stop trembling all over. Arbor waved his hand. The two purple forest guards understood and escorted one of the young men forward. Under Arbor's signal, one of the purple forest guards pulled out a dagger from his waist and viciously pinched the young man's arm, leaving behind a gaping wound. The young man's face turned pale with fright, and his body couldn't help but sway a bit. But very quickly, a black-patterned hemostatic pill was flicked into his mouth. Everyone instantly saw the bowl-sized wound on the young man's arm heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The bleeding immediately stopped. In a mere half a minute, the wound had disappeared without a trace. If it weren't for the 1 or 2 drops of blood dripping down the arm, everyone would have thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Heavens! Was this the effect of a god-tier hemostatic pill? The speed at which it stopped bleeding was probably heaven-defying. Everyone's thoughts suddenly became active, and they looked eagerly at the little crown princess. Chapter 3688. Especially that minister from the Ministry of War, his eyes were so wide that they almost popped out. If the army could master this kind of hemostatic pill, needless to say, when the entire army fought the enemy on the battlefield, it would definitely increase their chances of victory. With such a hemostatic pill in their hands, why would they worry about not being able to win the battle? Mo Lien saw that her father was glaring at her like this, and quickly said, "Jojo isn't someone who can make a god-level pill with such an effect every time. Jojo was only a heaven-grade pill refiner, and she was lucky to be able to make a god-level pill." That was what His Highness the Crown Prince meant. Mo Lushing turned his head to look at his daughter-in-law, his eyes containing a trace of expectation, almost burning like the scorching sun. And at this time, Shan Yisu, who was originally lying on the ground like a dead dog, crazily got up, wanting to pounce on Arbor in front of her. She let out a sharp whistle, and sternly shouted, "Impossible." Impossible. How can you be such a young god-level pill refiner? You must be lying, you're hiding something on your body, hiding something. It's a divine tool, right? A divine tool to help you condense the pill quickly, right? You vicious woman. You can't possibly be a god-level pill refiner. I'm indeed not a god-level pill refiner, Arbor coldly interrupted her, and indifferently said, I'm just a heaven-grade pill refiner. Occasionally, I can make 1 or 2 black-veined god-level pills. She glanced at her pitifully and pursed her lips. But this is already pretty good, isn't it? Compared to you, a god-level pill refiner with a false appearance. I'm a person who started from the basics of distinguishing medicinal herbs, and spent a lot of effort to learn how to distinguish herbs, smell herbs, refine herbs, and concoct herbs. I should be better than you, just a little bit. Arbor gestured with 2 little fingers, and indifferently said, I only dare to say that I know a little about the Tao of medicine. You're really strong, half a bucket of water dares to pretend to be a god-level pill refiner in front of me. How did you become a god-level pill refiner, don't you know in your heart? Stop pretending. You don't look like one at all. Pooh. Shan Isu actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Everyone looked at her strangely. This single-clothed Su was actually angered to the point of vomiting blood by the little crown princess words. Oh my god, how much anger must he have in his heart to be this angry? Arbor stared coldly at the wriggling woman on the ground. There was no pity in his eyes. You can only blame yourself for reaching out so far and trying to lay your hands on Jojo's Ren. Jojo's lotus was not something that any cat or dog could touch. The little crown princess condensed an icicle in her hand and threw it at Shan Isu's face without saying a word. You can't kill me. Single-clothed Su was lying on the ground. She raised her head as she gasped for breath. At this moment, the icicle was only an inch away from her eyes. It was as if he took another step closer, he would be able to pierce through her eye. You can't kill me, Arbor. Single-clothed Su struggled to crawl half a step on the ground. She raised her head and looked at her coldly. I have a way to protect Her Majesty the Empress's life. That, even if you don't concoct a god-level pill. It can guarantee Her Majesty the Empress's life for half a year. Upon hearing this, Old City Lord Bai hastily stepped forward and stood next to the little crown princess. Just as he was about to speak, Mo Lien raised her hand to stop him. The little stoic looked coldly at that single-clothed Su. Chapter 3689. The little stoic stared at her for a good while before curling her lips at her with an odd expression. Have you heard of the longevity fruit? Sand-clothed Su's eyes abruptly widened as she stared fixedly at the icicle in the little crown princess's hand. It instantly expanded and pierced through her forehead with a whoosh. That icicle pierced through her forehead with a crisp ding, directly ejecting a black crystal the size of a fingernail from the back of her head. Sand-clothed Su tried her best to widen her eyes and stared fixedly at Arbor before collapsing to the ground with a bang. Perhaps she didn't understand what was going on even until her death. How could the little crown princess really dare to do such a vicious thing to her? The entire venue was silent. Everyone stared dazedly at the collapsed sand-clothed Su before simultaneously shifting their gazes to the black crystal on the ground. Earlier, the crown princess seemed to have said that the people of heavenly fate all had something like a black crystal in their heads. Was it this thing? What was the difference between this and a corpse puppet core? Everyone curiously sized up the fingernail-sized black crystal on the ground and furtively peeked at the expressionless little crown princess. Everyone has seen it, right? Huifeng squatted down and picked up the tiny black crystal on the ground, placing it in front of everyone as he said aloofly, "This is enough to prove that this divine rank alchemist publicly acknowledged in the 3 provinces is actually a member of heavenly fate." Heavenly fate. They have now become everyone's public enemy in the 3 provinces. Huifeng clenched his fists and said to everyone, "From the looks of it now, the people of heavenly fate have already infiltrated every family clan and patrician family since a long time ago. They might even be right beside you and me. His Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess mean that after we leave today, every family and clan should strictly investigate the backgrounds of their own family members. Anyone with an unknown background or who seems suspicious must be put under control first. The family heads looked at each other in dismay before finally electing Mutsang to speak. Patriarch Mu was still in shock and hadn't recovered his wits yet, so he asked weakly, "But don't tell me we have to cut open their heads one by one." This method was indeed a little cruel. Huifeng said indifferently, "You can hand over all the suspects to the Crimson Forest Guard. We have a special way to deal with them. There's no need to dissect their brains." Patriarch Mu and the others nodded dubiously. And now, the banquet had come to an end. Whether it was the great emperor or the courtiers, this meal was so miserable that none of them were in the mood to continue. After the banquet ended in a hurry, the great emperor hurriedly summoned the crown prince and the crown princess to the Extreme Time Palace's imperial study. Seeing the young couple enter the room hand in hand, the emperor couldn't help but get up to welcome them. He asked anxiously, "Jojo, you said you have a way to help your mother? Is this true?" Arbor knew that this person was anxious, so he didn't hide it. He nodded and said, "Yes." The eyes of his grandfather, Bai Sheng, who was standing at the side and had not stepped forward, brightened when he heard this. It was just that he had helped Pill Master Dan deal with the little girl's enemy, so he knew that the little girl wouldn't have a good impression of him for the time being. Thus, he didn't dare to step forward and incur her disdain. "Why, you can save her now?" Mo Lushing asked cautiously. Chapter 3690. Arbor shook his head and didn't beat around the bush with them, saying directly, "I said that when I become a saint-level alchemist, I can definitely save her. But before that, as long as she eats the longevity fruit, her body will definitely be fine. It's fine even if her body doesn't deteriorate for 10 years. Longevity fruit? Mo Lusheng and Baixing exclaimed one after the other. Arbor nodded. Can we wait for 2 months? Just now, the old man said that Imperial Mother's body wouldn't last until the end of the year. They could definitely wait until the 8th of the 8th month. Logically speaking, the longevity fruit would take 3 months to bear fruit. Arbor was already urging Little Water and Little Earth to speed up the planting of this fruit. 2 months couldn't be faster. Even if the fruit ripened, the effect would be greatly reduced. Mo Liushing's eyes couldn't help but mist. He grabbed Arbor's hand and nodded. Okay, Imperial Father believes in you. You can definitely help your Imperial Mother get through this difficult time. Arbor nodded, but his little paw was suddenly pulled back by Mo Yen. Mo Lushing glanced at his son and pretended to be serious. Alright, it's getting late. Go back and have a good rest. Old Master Bai opened his mouth and watched the young couple walk out of the door. Do you think the longevity fruit that the little girl spoke of is reliable? The old master looked at his son-in-law with a dignified expression. He was embarrassed to yell at the young couple, so he didn't pay much attention to his son-in-law. He would say whatever he wanted. Mo Lushing nodded. According to my understanding of the little girl in this period of time. This little girl usually doesn't boast. If she says the longevity fruit is feasible, then it's definitely feasible. Old Master Bai nodded. All right. He also hoped that this granddaughter-in-law really had the longevity fruit in her hands, and not deliberately used it to deceive them in order to deal with that Shawnee Sioux. Mo Lushing glanced at the old master and coughed lightly. Don't worry, according to my understanding of this little girl, she won't easily promise something she isn't sure of. Looks like you have a high opinion of her. Old Master Bai looked deeply at his son-in-law. In the future, Old Master will have more contact with the little girl. Naturally, he will know. If Old Master insists on going down the path of death, even your son-in-law won't be able to help you. Mo Lushing secretly face-bombed. He knew very well that his son had already been instigated by his daughter-in-law and was completely useless. Between his wife and his grandfather, that guy would definitely stand by his wife's side. Humph! Elder Bai angrily raised his hand and patted the dust off his body. Just now, he had been forced into a fluster by that little girl's talismans. Now that he thought about it, it was really fucking embarrassing. This girl is not only an alchemist, but also a great talisman master. Now that he thought about it, he still felt a little shocked. Mo Lushing nodded. Yes. His talent is not bad. The old man curled his lips, flicked his sleeves, and walked out of the door. In the end, she said in an indignant voice, it's just that her temper is too bad. Mo Lushing, didn't you also not say anything when you came up and directly made a move to protect that Shawnee Su? Don't say who has a bad temper. Aren't we all straightforward and lousy? Haha. Achoo. Lord Jojo reached out to rub his little nose and looked back at the deep night. Someone must be talking bad about me. Chapter 3691. How could that be? Mo Lien hugged his wifey in amusement and rubbed her small face. I'll beat up whoever dares to speak ill of my wifey. Sir Jojo blinked. What if it's your grandfather talking about me? Mo Lien chuckled and said without hesitation, beat him up then. Let him cause a ruckus in there. He doesn't know how good Jojo is. The little fellow pursed her lips and said seriously with a taut face, your grandfather must be talking about me right now. He has a terrible temper. How could that be? Mo Lien couldn't resist laughing and tucked a strand of her hair behind her head. He then cupped her small face and looked at her intently. My Jojo's temper isn't bad. The little fellow nodded and said in full agreement, you're right. I'm usually too lazy to argue with people and don't want to get angry. That Shawnee Su was truly too much. If she didn't kill her and allowed her to annoy her every day, how could that be okay? Moreover, this already proved that Shawnee Su was a person of destiny, so she deserved to die, all right? Lien. The little fellow squeezed toward him and hugged his waist. She asked softly, now that we have time, you should honestly confess yesterday's matter. I'll confess everything. Prince Mo nodded repeatedly and sold out Duan Yu without any integrity. Hey, it was Duan Yu who sent me a message. That Rongli from Tsangzhou has a hole in his head. He actually brought people to capture you. Originally, this matter was vexing enough. Who knows how many people were hoping for our wedding to go awry. Prince Mo huffed, so I contacted Duan Yu in advance. He who strikes first gains the advantage. When Prince Mo said this, he truly didn't feel that he was too ruthless. Thinking about it now, he still felt some lingering fear. If Rongli really spread the news that Jojo had a portable spirit domain, the trouble in the future would be even greater. Arbor's big bright eyes stared straight at the man beside him. So you set up a trap and let Rongli walk right into it? Arbor couldn't help but blink curiously. Duan Yu's message was vague, so how did Rongli know that I carried the spirit domain with me? Do you still remember Chen Baojia who escaped? Chen Baojia went to Tsangzhou? Chen Baojia was kidnapped by Ba Shu from the academy. Arbor was enlightened. No wonder I couldn't find this woman. The Chen family still insisted that I was the one who hid her. It's really strange. Chen Baojia reported me to Rongli, and Rongli came to arrest me? Arbor understood the course of events and said with a nod, so you and Duan Yu attacked him first. But he looked perfectly fine when he attended the banquet just now. Mo Lien smiled faintly. The little guy suddenly opened his mouth wide with a look of realization on his face. I know. The Rongli we saw at night. Mo Lien gently covered her mouth. All right. It's already very late tonight, so let's rest early. I'll take you somewhere early tomorrow morning. After the carriage arrived at the Eastern Palace, Missouri Lien carried the little fellow down and strode into the bedchamber. When Sir Jojo saw the door to the bedchamber, his entire body went limp for no reason, and he couldn't resist exclaiming, "What are you doing?" Chapter 3692. The little fellow reached out and wrapped her arms around her neck. Her expression was slightly unnatural, and she instantly wanted to change the topic. So you're saying that you and Duan Yu planned this beforehand? What do you mean by premeditated? You make it sound like we're bad guys. Mo Lien frowned in dissatisfaction. This is called strategizing. Victory is decided from 1,000 miles away. If it weren't for the fact that he had to resolve Rong Li's matter as soon as possible and that there were several people who secretly wished for nothing more than his misfortune, how could he have rushed to Heaven's Saint Palace so late and caused his Jojo to suffer a bit of grievance? Don't think he couldn't find out which families were the culprits. Humph, when he settled down and freed himself, these people shouldn't even think about having an easy time in the future. Hubby, put me down. The little stoic said seriously, I made an appointment with Rotten Peach Blossom today to enter seclusion in Paradise Planet for a while. Mo Lien's eyes instantly narrowed dangerously as he looked down at his wifey. One moment it's Duan Yu, the next it's Rotten Peach Blossom. Wifey, you've been calling out another man's name today. Sir Jojo looked at her husband in bewilderment and closed her eyes, pretending to faint. Dizzy, hubby, I'm going to sleep. Haha. Hubby's laughter was a bit scary. What to do? It's fine, you sleep. Wifey, I'll carry you to take a bath first. The little fellow's face instantly turned bitter, and the word embarrassed was written all over her face. Hubby, it hurts. Mo Lien retracted his hand and cupped her small face. He looked at her seriously and said, It's right that it hurts. Because our movements last night weren't very standard, this kind of situation requires more practice in order to make long-term progress. We'll slowly torment each other for a while, and we'll definitely be able to enter the realm of being one with the heavens. Why did he make it sound like they were practicing martial arts? What kind of fallacious reasoning was this? Hubby always had a bellyful of bizarre reasoning, so how could she break it? This time, the little stoic also couldn't keep up the act and opened her eyes. Under the moonlight, those eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of mist. The dense moisture caused Mo Lien's heart to ripple endlessly. His fingers couldn't help but caress her small face, gently caressing it. It was so soft that it seemed like it could overflow with water. His gaze was glued to hers, as if they were going to be entangled for a long time. At this moment, their breaths were intertwined, and the heat from their bodies seemed to follow the air, completely evaporating and dispersing. The stars were shining brightly tonight. This feeling, this scene, and this heart, lingered and melted into one. Jojo. He gently planted a kiss on her forehead and said in a low and hoarse voice, Remember to block that star field. Reaching out, Mo Lien lifted the bead curtain that was constantly colliding under the starlight, and quickly carried her into the pool. Along with the sound of water that was neither fast nor slow, a soft moan that was mixed with heavy breathing blended into the night. The next morning, Mr. Jojo struggled to get out of bed with a sullen expression on his face. He was picked up by a refreshed man beside him. Jojo. Prince Mo rubbed against her face and said with a grin, Today's weather is really good. Look, the sun came out so early. Hubby will take you to a good place to stroll around. I guarantee you'll like it. Where are we going? The little fellow pulled a long face and glared at him in a huff. Hiking in the suburbs. The man stretched out his head and pecked her on the cheek. Chapter 3693. Although that guy had carried her away to soak her in a medicinal bath, she hadn't even moved her pinky. That guy had served her the entire time. However, Sir Jojo, who was slumped in the carriage, still felt sore all over. Every part of his body didn't belong to him. Get lost. When the little fellow saw him approach, she immediately narrowed her eyes vigilantly and swept a disdainful gaze at him. Mo Lien blinked and inched closer to her. He happily hugged his wifey as he shook his head repeatedly and said, I'll roll. I'll roll to your side, roll here and there, roll here and there. I won't go anywhere else. Arbor couldn't help but want to laugh. She secretly suppressed the urge to laugh and maintained her stoic expression as she snorted. Mo Lien pulled her little hand over with a grin and kissed it hard on the lips. Jojo, hubby hasn't seen you for a month. Don't you miss me? She did before, but seeing how noisy this person was now, she didn't miss him at all. Hubby missed you so much. I even brought you many gifts that you'll like. The little fellow didn't even bother to bat her eyelids. She leaned against the thick carpet and stared at him with her dark eyes. Prince Mo was overjoyed and simply reached out to carry this little one onto his lap. Without waiting for her to roll her eyes in protest, he swiped his hand and took out a black lingji mushroom of excellent quality from his inner world. The little girl instantly forgot to struggle. Her large eyes sparkled as she stared at the lingji mushroom. Her little hand involuntarily touched it. I found this in the underground valley after the arrayed disc in Grey Ping village collapsed. Mo Lien hugged her and tilted his head to rub against her neck. Isn't it very good? It should be a god-rank medicinal ingredient. The little girl nodded vigorously. It was a god-rank medicinal ingredient, and the quality was quite good. It was really very good. This kind of black lingji mushroom could also be planted in Paradise Planet's 100-herb garden in the past, and it could also propagate very well. However, it had a better place to go now. In Forest Planet, with the blessing of time, this black lingji mushroom should be able to grow into a patch in no time. A hint of joy appeared on the little girl's face. Mo Lien was so good at reading people's body language. Noticing that his wife was happy, he immediately took advantage of the situation and turned the little fellow's small face to face him with a serious expression. Jojo, return the favor. The little fellow stared blankly for a moment, his eyes wide open as he stared at him. Crown Prince Mo instantly revealed a pitiful, "My heart hurts so much, my heart is broken, I can't take it anymore, Chow Chow, you've hurt me," expression. He clutched his chest and cried out in agony, Chow Chow, Chow Chow, you're bad. In the past, whenever you gave me a gift, I would consciously give you a gift in return. Now that it's my turn to give you a gift, why aren't you giving me a gift in return? Really, really? Sir Jojo had a confused look on his face. What gift in return? Why do I feel like I've been trapped by this two-faced guy? You don't remember? The little fellow looked at him accusingly, making Jojo feel a little uneasy. It's not that I don't remember, the little fellow said stubbornly. Then return the favor. Mo Lien winked at him. Oh. Arbor was thinking hard about how to return the favor when Mo Lien suddenly hugged him and pressed him against her. You really forgot. Bad guy, then your husband will come and get it himself. Mo Lien muttered, his phoenix eyes shining. Chapter 3694. Arbor was taken aback. Just as his lips were about to touch hers, she finally remembered this fellow's so-called return gift seemed to be an indecent kiss. When she was still a child, this fellow used this method to trick her into thinking that she was young and ignorant. God knows how many kisses he had cheated from her. Sir Jojo wanted to push his face away, but her small hand was immediately wrapped in his palm. Jojo, I still have a gift for you. This fellow was so mean he took out one gift after another, then asked for a return gift. Arbor didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the pile of herbs by his legs. Along the way, the two of them spent their time returning gifts back and forth. When they were about to reach the villa in the suburbs, Arbor threw the herbs into Forest Planet and let Little Two be responsible for planting them. Afterward, she hammered this indecent fellow and grumpily said, Let me ask you something. You just said that there's a formation disc under Greyfield Village? A talisman array? It's a talisman array. Mo Lien thought of the holy stone's location, and her phoenix eyes narrowed. I suspect that there's a holy vein in the valley I fell into. I plan to ask Huifeng to bring a bunch of brats from the Purple Forest Guard to dig there in 2 days. She originally wanted to send Huifeng to Mount Heaven Saint to mine, but now it seemed that Greyfield Village was the best place. In any case, the remaining zombies there had all been wiped out by them. Even if there were a few that slipped through the net, they wouldn't be a problem at all. Now that the problem of safety was resolved, the matter of the holy vein had to be settled as soon as possible. Knowing that there was such a large holy vein but not touching it didn't fit Mo Lien's personality. Our dear Huifeng, who was far away in Greyfield Village, couldn't help but sneeze and look up at the sky in confusion. Holy vein? It sounded a bit familiar. Sir Jojo blinked. You mean that you found a holy vein in the talisman array under Greyfield Village? Mo Lien nodded. Yes. I reckon that the holy vein is quite large. So the branch of the ball that was left by your side absorbed a large amount of holy stone, right? Mo Lien was stunned. She lowered her head and looked at Jojo from head to toe. Did it affect you? Arbor shook his head. It affected Little Tree. He went into seclusion and hasn't woken up yet. Oh. Mo Lien nodded. Then it shouldn't be a problem. After I shattered the formation disk in Grey Plain Village, I came out and met up with Hui Feng and the others. After that, in order to save time, Little Seven and I returned to Dragon Flame City. However, we encountered a lot of resistance along the way. Mo Lien's eyes narrowed slightly. The Qin estate is adding fuel to the fire, as well as the Long and Gu families. I'm a little surprised that the Lin family's patriarch from Rome City is also involved in this matter. The Lin family wants to develop in Dragon Flame City, Arbor said coldly. This will depend on whether the lives of his disciples are tough enough. Mo Lien curled her lips mockingly and continued, we were ambushed by a large group of people on the 10-mile slope. In order to replenish my holy power, I took out the holy stones. Ball's Vine, thinking of that scene, Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That thing was like a mouse that had fallen into a rice bowl. When it saw the holy stones, it desperately crawled over and stuck to them. In the end, it absorbed less than 3 holy stones on its own. The remaining dozens of holy stones all went into the vine's stomach. It made everyone speechless. Chapter 3695. This really is a sentient tree, Mo Lien ridiculed. It only has a vine branch, yet it knows how to snatch food from others. Arbor's eyes curved. Lien, while you were at Graping Village, I also did a lot of things. The little fellow was in the mood to talk for once. She recounted to Mo Lien everything that happened in the Mu family's Chaoyang pavilion without stopping. Then she blinked and said to him, I think that the sacred vein you found in Graping Village should have been left to me by Patriarch Chaoyang. Didn't you say that there were layers of talisman arrays left behind by a heaven-level talisman master outside? It should have been done by Patriarch Chaoyang. Mo Lien thought carefully and couldn't help but nod with a smile. It really is very possible. Then do you want to go? Mo Lien rubbed his wife's head. If you want to go, let's go together. Arbor pondered for a few seconds and made a sound of agreement. She nodded. Of course I have to go. But I heard that the Academy's Tianyuan ranking is about to open. I want to find time to go back to the sect. Eldest senior sister has been awake for a few days. I should send her back first and reunite with second martial uncle and the others. The carriage suddenly shook and a cry of surprise came from outside. They had already reached the south of the city and the carriage was heading towards the capital suburbs. The carriage abruptly came to a stop after a sudden movement. Mo Lien grasped the little fellow's hand and hugged her. Her voice faintly traveled out through the curtain. What is it? Arbor pursed her lips. This guy was one face in front of others and another in front of her. He was especially good at bewitching people. For example, he took off his clothes and turned into a beast. Put on clothes. He was well dressed, but he couldn't change the nature of a bad guy, reporting to your highness, the road ahead is blocked. Change the road. Mo Lien ordered coldly. Your highness. The coachman hurriedly said, the outside is blocked by the crowd, and we can't turn into the left side road. Mo Lien lifted the curtain of the carriage with one hand and glanced outside. Sure enough, there was a sea of people in front of them. Even the crossroads were full of people. The two of them got off the carriage hand in hand. When they turned around, the road behind them was also blocked by the crowd and carriages. They were in a dilemma. What's up ahead? The little stoic asked curiously. I don't know. Why is the road suddenly so congested? Complaints could be heard from the crowd. A woman standing next to their carriage stealthily glanced at Xiao Mu and Mo Lien, and she was secretly speechless. Suddenly, she felt a chill on the back of her feet. The woman looked down and hurriedly took a few steps back. She cried out, "Oh my, where did such cold water come from?" At this moment, the little stoic was currently standing on a stool. When she lowered her head to look, sure enough, she saw a layer of water flowing over from the direction of the city gates, mixed with a multitude of miscellaneous roars. "Move aside, move aside, move aside, all of you move aside. Wow, aren't these people from the Long family? What are they doing? What are they transporting with so many carriages?" This bunch of grandsons blocked the road ahead and behind. Everyone was grumbling, and the little stoic also jumped off the stool. However, before her feet touched the ground, she felt her small body being picked up by Prince Mo. "The ground is very wet." Mo Lien looked down and disdainfully lifted her feet. The surface of his brocade boots was already wet from the water. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.